Chapter Volume 318. Just Who is Being Disrespectful? You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Lin Shi's voice wasn't all that loud, but it was instead extremely powerful, because this was indeed the truth. From start to finish, regardless of whether it was Qin Siya or Lu Ziyu, they didn't see him cultivate themselves at all. Everything they said was completely founded on assumptions. Because it was powerful, this mountain path immediately sank into a momentary silence. Don't tell me that you were cultivating with quite the effort. A medicine department golden spoon felt like a group of people suddenly becoming silent under Lin Shi's words made them lose a bit of face. He walked up, and then with a cold smile, said, "If you cultivated each day extremely bitterly, yet you still have this type of cultivation in the end, then wouldn't you have even less prospects in the future? So having prospects means someone is worth being friends with them. If they don't, then they aren't worth being friends with." Lin Shi's eyes swept over this medicine department golden spoon youngster and Lu Ziyu at his side, saying indifferently, "Since these are the system of values that are rooted into your very hearts, why is there a need to talk about matters of cultivation?" The Academy's well-known beauty Qin Siya's brows furrowed even more deeply. Lin Shi's words seemed to be extremely sharp, a bit disrespectful, but this also made her realize that her own words were also extremely disrespectful. As such, she looked Lin Shi directly in the eyes for the first time, seriously saying, "Qin Siya, am not like as you say. When I make friends, I do not purely look at background and prospects. If you can prove that you are not as lazy and unsightly as I say, if you can prove that you are quite diligent in your cultivation, then I can change my opinion of you. I will also apologize for all of my words to you before. How do you want me to prove it to you?" Lin Shi gave this woman who was more beautiful than even the movie stars of his past world a look, the corners of his lips curling up slightly, and then with a bit of natural pride, he said, "So what if you said those things about me? It is nothing more than your own opinion. If everyone who I didn't care about had some opinions about me, could it be that I have to explain myself to every single one of them? Where would I get this much time to waste?" Lin Shi's tone was extremely calm and indifferent, but for these people who originally looked down on him from above, it possessed exceptional destructive force. The medicine department golden spoon youngster's expressions went rigid, Lu Ziyu's brows also furrowing and saying, "Siya was speaking to you so nicely, giving you a chance to prove yourself. Lin Shi, aren't you a bit too disrespectful?" Lin Shi looked at Lu Ziyu, and then with a laugh of ridicule, said, "I am disrespectful? You all surrounded me previously, then said all those things. That wasn't disrespectful. One only needs to care about the opinions of people they care about. If you paid attention to everyone's opinions, then wouldn't you tire yourself to death, die from overworking? If it wasn't because Gao Yanan disputed with you all because of me, I would feel that it was beneath me to even explain this bit of common sense to you. As for the so-called proving myself," Lin Shi turned slightly to look at Qin Siya whose face now produced a trace of anger, and then at Gao Yanan who had always been looking at him seriously, with a hint of arrogance. He said to himself, "This cultivation test, it's not like it'll only happen once." He then spoke out loud, "In the future, there will naturally be opportunities to prove myself. Today, you all are speaking so decisively, but in the future, if you find that my cultivation has instead surpassed you all, at that time, how will you all act? Let's go." After saying these things, Lin Shi turned around, nodding towards Gao Yanan and leaving this place. Gao Yanan also nodded, starting to move. While watching Gao Yanan follow Lin Shi, Lu Ziyu's heart immediately became filled with an indescribable hidden anger, his face completely sinking. "Proving yourself in the future is all fine and dandy, but I just wonder how long we have to wait. Either way, there is no harm in me telling you that right now. My strength has already exceeded 200 gene, cultivation already at the mid-stage soul knight level. Moreover, there is also no reason to hide from you that in the training valley, I have withdrawn with 5 emblems 9 times. I wonder if, by telling you these things, you will still dare speak the crazy words you just uttered. Let me ask, when do you feel like your cultivation can overtake mine?" Lin Shi stopped walking on the mountain path into the poisonous medicine valley. His momentary quiet and slightly rigid rear figure gave Lu Ziyu and the others a mistaken assumption, thinking that Lu Ziyu had stepped on a sore point, believing that he only had sharp teeth and a fierce tongue, using words to hide his own cowardness and powerlessness. Lu Ziyu and the others' faces began to show expressions of happiness and scorn, while Qin Siye's face became even colder. However, Lin Shi instead turned around, looking at Lu Ziyu. Then, with extremely strong mockery and confidence, he said, "This type of accomplishment in mid-stage soul knight cultivation is enough for you to feel arrogance. I really hate trouble, and I dislike people like you. Didn't you want to ask me how long it would take? Then I can make a bet with you. In 1 month, I can break this bit of arrogance of yours, and I'll only have one request. Next time, wherever I am, I do not wish to see you, so please be conscientious and leave on your own." The mountain path became dead quiet once more. The faces of Lu Ziyu and the other Golden Spoon youngsters at his side became extremely ugly, Lu Ziyu's fine white face even more so, producing a flush of redness from anger. Just a trifling 90 gene heaven's choice, a bumpkin actually dared to look down on him, speak to him like this. When he thought about how Qin Siye and Gao Yanan were still here, Lu Ziyu forcibly swallowed the vile words that were about to pour out from his mouth, doing his best to say with a calm and cold voice, "Fine, then I will wait a month, wait for you to surpass me. However, if you cannot do what you just said, then I also only have one request. In front of all of our medicine department students' faces, you have to admit you are all talk, just a pitiful creature putting on an act." Lin Shi didn't get angry, only revealing a faint smile, nodding towards Qin Siye. "Since that is the case, then I must ask Qin Siye and everyone else to serve as witnesses. Are you really ignorant or crazy? A month of time, yet you want to go from initial stage soul knight cultivation to exceeding mid-stage soul knight." Qin Siye clenched her teeth, also feeling incredible resentment. She didn't say anything either, nodding, and then turning her head, not looking at Lin Shi again. "Then we've come to an agreement." Lin Shi gave Lu Ziyu, Qin Siye and the others a rather meaningful look, not saying anything else either, continuing into the poisonous medicine valley ahead. Lin Shi. Yanin. Jiang Yuer saw that the situation had already completely reached an impasse, becoming extremely nervous. She wanted to chase after them, but then didn't really dare either. Noel.N. Jiang Yuer, do you want to stay with Gao Yanan, or do you wish to enter the poisonous medicine valley with me? You need to make your decision now. Qin Siye said coldly. I do not want you to say any more. When she heard Qin Siye speak like this, after giving the determined Qin Siye a look, and then looking at Lin Shi and Gao Yanan who walked side by side, Jiang Yuer's mouth became flat, her entire face red, about to cry from the pressure and anxiety. However, when she saw Gao Yanan and Lin Shi walk further and further away, recalling how Lin Shi didn't really provoke them, how Lin Shi told her a joke that day, she quietly said to Qin Siye, I'm sorry, and then with her head lowered, she didn't dare to look at Qin Siye and the others, quickly chasing after Gao Yanan and Lin Shi. Don't tell me that the belief that noblemen don't associate with those of low status, don't become friends with those with no sense of shame, students who don't understand glory, is wrong. Out of the corners of her eyes, Qin Siye watched as even Jiang Yuer followed Gao Yanan. Her jade-like face became even colder, even more anger and sadness from being misunderstood appearing in her eyes. Lu Ziyu endured the unhappiness he felt within, and then with an expression of currying favor, he looked towards the truly beautiful Qin Siye, saying, we should go as well. Siye, you don't need to feel anger over this type of person. You all should go first. I'll follow in a bit. However, what made his entire body go rigid, feel an indescribable wave of wrath surge even more powerfully within him, was that Qin Siye instead remained in place, saying this to him. Lin Shi, do you really have confidence in surpassing Lu Ziyu in a month's time? Gao Yanan calmly and carefreely walked with Lin Shi along this mountain path decorated with purple iris at both sides, quietly asking this. Just now, when Qin Siye was forcing her to make a decision, she indeed didn't feel that great, but her temperament was one where she let bygones be bygones. Now, what left her curious was why Lin Shi had such great confidence. Lin Shi revealed a smile, saying, "Because of some reasons, I cannot tell you exactly right now, but I can promise you that I definitely won't tell you any lies. I really should be able to completely surpass him within 1 month. Regardless of whether it is martial skill, cultivation, or the so-called comprehensive strength. It seems like you have quite the secrets." Gao Yanan frowned slightly. When she thought about this seriously, her face developed a bit more moving expressions, making even Lin Shi's heart feel more untroubled, his spirit free. Lin Shi looked at her slightly furrowed brows, and then said seriously, "A person will always have some of their own little secrets, right? What you say is true, one will always have some small secrets." Gao Yanan nodded her head, expressing her approval. "I like this way of speaking. If you can't talk about your little secrets now, then just say you cannot talk about it, not saying false things." After a slight pause, Gao Yanan quietly said, "I promise you that I won't say anything false either. Lin Shi, can you promise me that in the future, you won't speak any lies to me either?" Gao Yanan spoke these words extremely calmly, but in Lin Shi's ears, there was instead a bit of entirely different emotions swirling in his heart. He gave this pretty and unique girl a look, and then seriously nodded. "I promise that I will definitely never speak anything false to you. I promise I won't tell you any lies either," a weak voice sounded. When he saw Jiang Yuer, who spoke bashfully, recalling how this shy girl actually followed them just now, Lin Shi couldn't help but smile. Originally, the enemies in his heart were only the blade and spear stone palace he was training in and Su Xingma, but since Lu Ziyu wanted to get involved, moreover mentioning cultivation and achievements, since this matter involved Gao Yanan and Jiang Yuer, Lin Shi felt like he had to teach Lu Ziyu and his band a lesson that was hard to forget. Even though Lu Ziyu's current cultivation was already at the mid-stage Soul Knight level, having more than 200 gene of strength, in reality, Lin Shi's current true strength was also already approaching 150 gene, on top of that still having a course point he didn't use yet. According to Nkei's predictions, if Lin Shi obtains another point and exchanges for a mountain sea clove pill, even with Lin Shi's aptitude, he should be able to reach 180 gene or more of strength. Based on Lin Shi's feeling, he might only need 2 weeks or so of time to break the blade and spear trial, just like the direct spear strikes trial. That was why as long as he could continuously obtain 5 successive 5 emblem withdrawal achievements in the training valley, in 1 month's time, exceeding Lu Ziyu wasn't an issue. Originally, it was just as simple as walking together into the valley, yet you all had to make things so complicated. Since you want to mention achievements, then let's see whose achievements are better then. Lin Shi walked confidently along the mountain path. Another reason that was worth feeling proud over, was that Tong Wei had said that his speed of entering meditation cultivation was #1 in the academy, which meant that even if he didn't borrow any spiritual medicines, if everyone relied purely on their own cultivation, then his speed of cultivation among the new students was #1 to begin with. Chapter Volume 319. Black cloth between the shaft and fingertips. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dusk, in the training valley. While dressed in the silver fox black armor, Lin Shi rushed through the mountain forest with a short blade he was familiar with in his hands. Even though both Su Xingma and Tong Wei's training were extremely strict, the increase they brought to his strength was still easy to see. Right now, what he wanted to do was first determine, with his current strength, just what level of opponent he could defeat in this mountain valley, the opponents who he originally couldn't defeat. If he couldn't find a powerful weapon or bow he liked, perhaps he could defeat them by relying on his special ability. If he could, then he could still fight against them, obtaining considerable experience from the battle, experiencing many benefits. If he couldn't and needed to chase after achievements, then he could only use his ability to avoid them for now. Since he was purposely trying to attract opponents this time, when moving through the mountain forest, Lin Shi intentionally made a lot of noise. After less than 15 minutes of time, Lin Shi saw a black-armored student who was currently cautiously moving through a weed-filled hillside that didn't provide that much cover. the two faced each other on a slightly inclined mountain slope. Yellow Antelope, this was an opponent Lin she had never encountered before. The black armored symbol on his chest was a yellow coiled horned antelope. Before entering the training valley this time, Lin she had carefully examined the simple and crude record signboard. The simple and crude signboard didn't have any rules written on it, but the Firefly and Thunder Python, who had both exceeded 5 instances of 5 emblem achievements, now ranked the highest, both had 9 successive 5 emblem withdrawals. Meanwhile, the nicknames of some experts Lin she was familiar with instead weren't necessarily still on the rankings. For the academy students who were all smart, this wasn't hard to understand. That signboard only recorded successive winning records, even if one obtained 5 instances of 5 emblem achievements. If they lost afterwards, not obtaining a 5 emblem achievement, then their record would naturally be cleared. Because there were 2 times where Lin she only left with 4 emblems during these days, the name, Silver Fox, didn't appear on that ranking. As for Lu Ziyu, with his cultivation and strength, he shouldn't be Tang Ku and the others' opponents. There were quite a few people who were stronger than him, which was why the 9 instances of 5 emblem withdrawal record he spoke about should only be 9 in total, and not like Firefly and Thunder Python, 9 times in succession. If they were only talking about the number of times, Lin she should have 7 times now in total. However, he still understood that this and continuous 5 emblem withdrawals weren't the same thing at all extremely clearly. Firefly and Thunder Python, as well as the individuals below them, what they represented was absolute power and strength, while Lu Ziyu, this type of accumulating 9 times, wasn't much at all. Meanwhile, this Yellow Antelope before him wasn't a ranked individual, his strength shouldn't be particularly great. Lin she gave the weapon in the other party's hand a look. It was an ordinary black long blade, not all that powerful either. While Lin she was thinking this, Yellow Antelope was also thinking that Silver Fox wasn't a well-known expert on the list. While Lin she was sizing up the weapon in his hands, he also saw the weapon in Lin she's hands, having the same thought. Because he felt like they could fight, this Yellow Antelope symboled black armored student raised the black longsword in his hands towards Lin she. This could be considered an act of courtesy, and then his quick steps crushed the weeds, rushing at Lin she like a black wave. When faced with this black armored student whose speed was becoming faster and faster, Lin she stood in place, not moving. He only stared at the other party's body, watching the black longsword in his hands closely. Only when the other party was in front of his face, when his shoulder fell slightly, about to deliver a strike, did he release a light shout. Taking a step forward, at the same time, he thrust his blade fiercely. In his hands was a blade, yet the form he took was a sword stance. The black armored student who took action at the same time immediately felt extreme fear, because the same green one sword thrusting motion, under the other party's movements, seemed to carry a wave of mysterious power that was erupting from the very soles of the other party's feet, launching through his body like a formless ripple. With a muffled and heavy paw sound, when his sword was still a foot away from his opponent, the opponent's blade already stabbed into his throat ferociously. A feeling of suffocation like that of being unable to swallow food and a feeling of pain instantly almost paralyzed his mind. Meanwhile, the other party's movements didn't stop at all. Following a smash into his shoulder, his body becoming unsteady, leaning backwards from the impact, the other party's blade drew a true blade form, thrusting fiercely at his neck. The black longsword in his hands finally fell powerlessly. He stared at Lin shi, clutching his throat as he fell onto the ground heavily. Only at this time did he finally admit that in an instant, he was already defeated by this opponent of his. Lin shi was a bit pleased. He took a step forward, picking up the black longsword. Just now, when he struck out with the way he trained with the green-edged sword, it was extremely fast as expected. Not even he himself expected this battle to actually end this easily. Currently, it hadn't been that long since he completed his Windstalker special lesson, so his arms were still sore and powerless. If he didn't experience Su Shengma and Tong Wei's training, this strike would definitely be even more ferocious. N. The moment he removed the golden pentagon emblem from Yellow Antelope's body, Lin Shi immediately suddenly turned around. It was because in the mountain forest behind him, there was a wave of clear footstep sounds. These steps were extremely steady, crushing the dried branches, making rocks tumble about. Because the other party didn't hide himself in the slightest, it seemed even more domineering. Lin Shi became a bit more serious. His left hand held the short blade, right hand the long sword, taking several dozen steps away from the Yellow Antelope, who was coughing with difficulty, heading to a level area, quietly waiting for this opponent to appear. Several tree branches were hacked aside by a black border army long blade. This opponent then appeared before Lin Shi's line of sight. Spirit Vulture. Lin Shi didn't know whether he should feel happy or nervous. Only, fine beads of sweat appeared between his palms. This black border army long blade wielding opponent had a Spirit Vulture symbol on his chest, ranked 4th on the Training Valley's signboard, accomplishing 8 successive 5 emblem withdrawal achievements. This was definitely a powerful individual. Silver Fox. When he saw the symbol on Lin Shi's chest, this opponent who wielded a black border army long blade instead stopped, the first to speak out. I recall seeing you on the ranking before as well, at that time already 4-5 emblem results. From how calm you are when facing me, it seems like you should have completed 5 instances of 5 emblem withdrawals. Lin Shi didn't mind giving the other party a bit of pressure, nodding his head. You are not wrong. I like fighting against strong opponents, I only hope that you won't disappoint me. The black border army long blade wielding Spirit Vulture nodded, and then continued walking with a steady gait in Lin Shi's direction. This really is a martial idiot, he is instead worried that his opponent isn't strong enough. Lin Shi laughed, but his body instead bent slightly, ready to exert strength at any time. Spirit Vulture's right leg suddenly stomped heavily into the ground, the earth's surface immediately erupting with waves of energy, a crater appearing in the level hillside. With the distance between him and Lin Shi and the situation he was in, with a stomp of his feet, his entire being could immediately charge at Lin Shi like an arrow. However, after this stomp, he actually didn't make any following movements. He only simply stamped his feet, but Lin Shi who wasn't greeted with an attack couldn't help but freeze up a bit. Lin Shi's body was like a bow that had already been drawn to its limit, the arrow about to leave his fingers, but he suddenly lost his target, causing him to stop rigidly in place. In that instant, Spirit Vulture already moved. His entire body sprung up from his original location, the black long blade hacking through the peaceful mountain wind, smashing down between Lin Shi's eyes. Dang! Lin Shi's black longsword faced his opponent. After just a single strike, sparks flew about, his right arm already completely numb, unable to even grip the black longsword. The long sword was directly smashed out of his hands. However, his movements didn't stop either. The moment his body leaned slightly to the left, the short blade in his left hand also smashed towards Spirit Vulture's lower abdomen. Spirit Vulture's figure stopped slightly, his left hand grabbing downwards, seemingly wishing to forcibly grab the short blade in Lin Shi's hand. What left him slightly baffled was that Lin Shi actually really let him easily grab the short blade. The instant he grabbed the short blade, Lin Shi's foot already smashed heavily into his chest, and then while borrowing the opposite force of that stomp, he rolled backward several times in a rather unattractive fashion, picking up the black longsword that flew out of his hands. Spirit Vulture's body swayed a bit, and then he stood steadily in place like a boulder. With a fling of his arm, he threw the short blade in his hands into the distant forest. He took a steady step in Lin Shi's direction, but what made his pupils under the silver mask rapidly contract was that this silver fox whose weapon was sent flying under a single exchange, cultivation clearly much inferior to his own, didn't back up, instead taking a firm step towards him, and then striking out. Moreover, this strike was far faster than he imagined. Dang! He, who was originally destined to be on the offensive, under this extremely vicious sword shadow, was actually forced to adopt a defensive position, only by blocking at an angle, letting the weapons grind against each other, did he barely block this strike. However, what left him shocked was that the other party still didn't back up. He moved past his side, the black longsword in his hand seemingly flying, hacking at his waist with extreme speed. Dang! He fiercely twisted his body, using his body's quick twisting motion to support the long blade in his hands that he didn't have time to react with. Like a whip, it forcibly blocked the opponent's attack. However, the other party didn't stop at all either, twisting his body, and then another blade hacked down. His breathing suddenly stopped, falling fiercely to his left side. The instant he fell, his left hand fiercely pressed against the ground, like a spinning top, his entire body tumbled outwards along the weed-filled slope. Lin Shi leapt out, the long sword in his hand hacking out once more. Dang! The long sword in his hands intersected with the black long blade in Spirit Vulture's hands just after he had stabilized himself once more. Pa! The long sword in his hands bounced out once again, and then following his leaning swooping stance, smashed towards Spirit Vulture's back. However, right at this time, Spirit Vulture's black long blade also left his hand, striking the long sword in his hands. Dang! Lin Shi's entire right arm shook, the strength he accumulated seemingly also completely scattered. The black longsword was forcibly sent flying out of his hands once more. However, Spirit Vulture's black long blade instead stopped its momentum in midair, returning to his hand. Between the shaft and fingers, was an unremarkable black old cloth strip. Chapter Volume 320. A reason that cannot be understood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The black old cloth strip between the shaft and the fingers, as well as the practiced manner of still not stopping to grab the shaft even after receiving his own heavy strike, made Lin Shi immediately understand that this should be a student with a border barbarian background, but he definitely wasn't Tang Ku. It was because Lin Shi understood Tang Ku extremely well. Ever since that older brother sacrificed his own life, he no longer had much desire for greatness, his ambition sealed. He didn't wish to see his companions die or bleed anymore, so Tang Ku definitely wouldn't have such powerful fighting intent. Your strength is indeed not bad. After the blade sent the long sword in Lin Shi's hands flying, Spirit Vulture, who turned around, didn't immediately take action, instead looking at Lin Shi and saying with a sunken voice, "Your movements and dodging are excellent, sword skills also fast, to the point where just now, I didn't even have confidence in striking your body, only able to send the long sword in your hand flying. If your cultivation level was close to mine, I might not be your opponent, but now, it is already a situation of inevitable defeat." When he heard Spirit Vulture's upright words, and then looked at the black long sword that was sent more than 10 steps away, stabbed obliquely into the ground, Lin Shi smiled, and then said, "What you said is correct, this time, I indeed lost, however what? This Spirit Vulture symbol black armored student not only had powerful cultivation, his willpower was also definitely extremely astonishing. It was because regardless of what cultivation was like, flesh and pain were the same. Just now, he was struck by Lin Shi's sword, yet he didn't even release a cry of pain. Meanwhile, right now, Lin Shi didn't even finish saying what he wanted to say, yet he was immediately interrupted, meaning that this individual was really fond of summarizing and reflecting over the gains and losses of his experiences. Having his level of strength was definitely not only because of talent. Lin Shi said, "However, if I predicted that your first stomp was fake from the start, I might be able to immediately land a strike. If I struck your leg, preventing you from moving freely, you perhaps might not be able to block my following successive strikes, right? What you said is also correct." Spirit Vulture stared blankly for a moment, but soon afterwards, he shook his head in annoyance. "No, this isn't entirely true, because this type of feint doesn't exist at all. That stomp, whether it is real or fake, that is completely my choice. Even if you were someone who had even greater experience, someone with a higher level of cultivation, you still wouldn't dare call my bluff and take action first. It is because if my charge was real, the following long blade strike can completely face anything. At that time, the results will instead be even worse, unless my opponent can completely understand what I was thinking at the time. The feint you speak of doesn't exist at all. In this world, there is no one who can anticipate what another is thinking, which is why your considerations are completely absurd. If you wish to win over me, your cultivation undoubtedly has to be about the same as mine. Perhaps because he was worried that his own thoughts might be disturbed by Lin Shi's thoughts, that it might lead to an unfavorable effect on his own cultivation, this black-armored student added this in irritation. Lin Shi laughed, deciding he wasn't going to argue with this somewhat of a martial idiot opponent anymore. He didn't even remove his own golden pentagon emblem, instead quietly saying, "Return." Time returned to 10 minutes ago. Lin Shi still hadn't faced Yellow Antelope yet. Just like before, when he made his way out from the mountain forest into the hillside, he saw Yellow Antelope walk over from the other side. Because he already knew about the other party, when faced with the charging black longsword-wielding Yellow Antelope, he was even calmer. Only when the other party's sword edge was raised did he suddenly strike out, sending Yellow Antelope into the ground once again. He picked up the black longsword, and then after removing a pentagram emblem from Yellow Antelope's shoulder, Lin Shi heard Spirit Vulture's steady footsteps. He took a deep breath, and then walked to the level area from before, watching Spirit Vulture walk out from the forest. Silver Fox. I recall seeing you on the ranking before. Lin Shi thought about the words this border barbarian spoke before, while the Spirit Vulture on the other side was currently looking at him, saying the exact same words. What you said is not wrong. Lin Shi's reply was the same as last time. I like fighting against strong opponents. I only hope that you won't disappoint me. The Spirit Vulture wielding a black border army long blade nodded, completely unaware that Lin Shi had already experienced this once before. He began to walk towards Lin Shi with a steady gait. When he was roughly 7 steps from Lin Shi, his right leg stamped heavily into the ground. He originally thought that Lin Shi would definitely believe that he would take action, but then discover that he didn't really want to attack, and then as a result be unable to help but display a bit of sluggishness. However, what made his brain immediately freeze was that the moment his right leg stamped heavily into the ground, taking a step, Lin Shi's entire body erupted with duty. Bound momentum, like a blooming black flower, with exceptional decisiveness, almost before his foot landed, Lin Shi's entire body already charged over, the black longsword brandishing about like torrential rain. Only when a lacerating intense pain extended from his left leg, instantly rushing into his brain, did his brain recover the ability to think. He completely couldn't believe this. How did the other party know that this was a feint? Even if it was an opponent who didn't understand martial skills, he could still definitely only be frightened stiff by his imposing stance, and definitely not take action decisively like this. Moreover, even if one saw through his bluff, this opponent's attack was just a bit too fast, as if before he even moved, the other party already knew what he wanted to do, already reacted. It was because the other party's movements seemed to almost have been made the same time as when he took the step, this preventing him from having the time to think at all, unable to change the leftover thoughts that were still spinning in his mind, change his feint into a real attack. However, how was this possible? How could there possibly be anyone in this world who knew what the other party was thinking? Good. At the same time, Lin Shi was filled with happiness. Without the slightest pause, he passed his opponent's body. With a turn of his wrist, he delivered another heavy strike to Spirit Vulture's left shoulder blade. Dang! The black long blade flew from Spirit Vulture's hand, smashing heavily into the black longsword in Lin Shi's hands, sending the black longsword flying. Just from the strength with which Lin Shi sent his sword into his shoulder, this experienced border barbarian already determined that his own cultivation was far greater than Lin Shi's, enough to prevent Lin Shi from being able to hold on to the long sword in his hands. However, this time, he couldn't accurately seize the cloth strips wrapped around the black long blade, because at this time, Lin Shi suddenly turned around, exerting force. The short blade in his left hand stabbed into Spirit Vulture's wrist fiercely. This strike caused even someone with an extremely sturdy will like Spirit Vulture to release a muffled groan of pain. The Black Border Army long blade fell from his hand. Pa! Lin Shi's second blade landed on his right shoulder, this blade making his entire right arm shake. When he subconsciously reached for the black long blade that fell, he also subconsciously wanted to roll to the side, yet he instead released another muffled groan. It was because the injury on his left thigh now flared out, due to the intense pain causing an unavoidable sluggishness. The instant his body still rolled to the side, Lin Shi's arms already gripped the short blade, and then together with his waist, crushed down, smashing down heavily at Spirit Vulture's lower back. Spirit Vulture fell onto the ground heavily. Just the pain from his lower back prevented him from twisting his body around, unable to attack again. Moreover, the other party's strangeness and swiftness were both already enough to make him lose the courage to continue fighting. I admit defeat. While full of confusion, this border barbarian shouted out these three words with a bit of humiliation. Lin Shi removed a golden pentagon emblem. He breathed heavily while happily leaving this place. These days, the Brave Slayer special training, Windstalker special training, and the dead thing Su Xingma looked down on, that is the direct spear strikes and the blade and spear torment, indeed increased his strength at an astonishing rate. Before, if it wasn't because he didn't have enough strength, he could even have a good fight against this border barbarian. Moreover, after using the ability to go back 10 minutes, being able to foresee the other party's movements and actions really was a huge advantage. If his condition was optimal, not like right now where his entire body was a bit sore, this battle might have been won even more easily. Now, he couldn't help but recall that in the legends, Principal Zhang has never lost before. However, cultivating in this world was slow for everyone. Principal Zhang definitely didn't immediately have astonishing cultivation after entering this world. This world had so many experts, who knew just how many experts he faced. For him to never have lost, it was likely because of this type of ability that allowed him to anticipate the movements of some powerful opponents. Since he could defeat even an opponent with 8 successive 5 emblem withdrawals, then obtaining 8 5 emblem accomplishments, 9 times, or even higher, wasn't at all impossible. Under the silver mask, Lin Shi who obtained a conclusive answer thought of Gao Yanan and Jiang Yuer, he thought of Lu Ziyu and Qin Siya, about Li Kaiyun and the others who shared all honor and disgrace with him. This made the corners of his lips couldn't help but draw a pretty arc upwards. I admit defeat, but what I cannot understand is, how did you know my action was a bluff? The moment he turned around to head towards the yellow perimeter walls, walking more than 10 steps out, Spirit Vulture who sat up from the ground with great difficulty couldn't help but shout at his rear figure. Lin Shi stared blankly. He already knew that this Spirit Vulture was a martial idiot, so if he found a random reason, the other party not believing him, then it really might have an unfavorable effect on his cultivation, but what reason could he even use? This left him with quite the headache. Did you use this trick before? After remaining quiet for a bit, Lin Shi asked. Spirit Vulture stared blankly for a moment. I have, and last time you used it, I was hiding on a large tree, just happened to see it. Lin Shi immediately smiled and said, that is why this time, I guessed that you would act the same, which is why I was able to win against you. So that was it. Spirit Vulture took this to be the truth, immediately feeling relieved. He muttered to himself and said, it seems like fooling the enemy really can't be used again and again. However, just because you saw it once, you would act like this, isn't this a bit too risky? When Lin Shi saw that this martial idiot new student believed him, he decided not to say anything else either, quickly turning around to leave. This time, he didn't want to provoke any more opponents, so he was extremely careful when moving through the mountain forest, completely silent. How did he accomplish this blow? Don't tell me it is precisely the unique potential of a Brave Slayer. While hiding in a treetop, while holding what was known as a Hawkeye in Yunqin's border army, known by people from Lin Shi's world as a monocular, Li Wu remained speechless for a long time. Lin Shi didn't realize that even though Spirit Vulture believed that he had seen him use this trick before, Li Wu understood that Lin Shi had never met Spirit Vulture before in the training valley extremely clearly. Lin Shi's strike left even Li Wu, an academy lecturer, in disbelief, unable to figure out the reasoning at all. Chapter Volume 321. The Most Impossible Person. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Inside the small courtyard, a small red clay furnace was propped up on burning pine branches, within it new unstrained green ant wine. Vice Principal Xia had a thin blanket over his body, sitting on a yellow bamboo chair that had been worn to the point where it had a glossy jade-like surface. On a small table next to him were small cowhide scrolls. In life, those who one could call true intimate friends were very few to begin with. This was especially true when one reached his age, the amount that remained would be even fewer. His close friends had already half withered and fallen. They didn't have much celebration in this life, always separated. This was a reality that couldn't be helped. Right now, he was drinking alone, which was why it seemed especially somber and lonesome. However, fortunately, he still had many things worth recalling, as well as many people he still had to take care of. That was why he wasn't idle at all, instead calm and peaceful. A light gotsy noise sounded, the small courtyard's renovated bamboo doors pushed open. A brass-frame bespectacled Xiao Mingxian walked into the small courtyard. He raised his hand, and then with a flick of his finger, a small scroll landed on the thin blanket covering Vice Principal Xia's knees. Then, he first brought out a bamboo chair from within on his own, then poured himself a cup of wine, blowing while sipping on it. When he unfolded the small scroll Xiao Mingxian tossed over, a look of gratification appeared on Vice Principal Xia's face. He glanced at Xiao Mingxian, his expression as if his expectations had been somewhat exceeded, then, with a sigh of admiration, he said, "This brat really is determined. I now finally understand why old Zhang said you are more suited to managing this academy than old Meng." Xiao Mingxian nodded. "Data, analysis, and logic, I am better at these than you, but judging people, this is something you are better at than me. Exceptional aptitude, formidable when facing enemies, these aren't very important, even Honorable Tsang Yu is capable of this. However, the key lies in that even after receiving the bitter training of both Su Xingma and Tong Wei, this type of torment, he is absorbing everything like sweet dew. When faced with humiliation, he could still have a calm heart. This brat really is a bit determined." After a nod, Xiao Mingxian removed the spectacles from the bridge of his nose, but he still couldn't help but release a rare sentence of praise. Vice Principal Xia revealed a faint smile. "However, he still has a bit of childishness. Su Xingma is definitely quite furious. It's best if he can wake up a bit from this anger. No matter how formidable one can become, just what degree can they reach? That person down south, the old fellas in Imperial City, which one of them are formidable characters?" Xiao Mingxian muttered in disdain. What old Zhang said was correct, we are all fish in a great river. No matter how strong the fish are, if they want to change the great river, then that is stupidity. When the fireflies in Four Seasons Plains beat their wings, no one will know just what kind of winds will be produced 10,000 li out. Vice Principal Xia laughed. He also poured out a cup of wine, starting to slowly drink it. Even though this Heaven's Core small courtyard looked secluded and lonely, this academy, this empire, this world, the things that happened day after day were like a flowing stream, gathering towards this small academy. Xiao Mingxian immersed himself in the analysis of data, not tending to too many private emotions. However, towards those individuals he was fond of himself, the ones he favored, watching them grow. Vice Principal Xia felt just like he was watching his own children. Lin Shi's daily performance would always be delivered into this small courtyard each day. That was why even if Vice Principal Xia didn't leave this small courtyard, he still knew that Qin Xie and Gao Yanan had a disagreement over Lin Shi on the mountain path, also knowing about Lin Shi and Lu Ziyu's 1-month agreement. Diu Vi Ko then, Lin Shi defeated Yellow Antelope in the training valley, and then defeated Spirit Vulture, afterwards entering the Blade and Spear Stone Temple. After that, Lin Shi defeated Golden Sunflower once more, furthermore also defeating Redbud. The days passed one after another. Vice Principal Xia remained in this peaceful small courtyard, watching as Lin Shi's achievements continuously grew. Ever since the day he defeated Spirit Vulture, Lin Shi didn't even lose once in the training valley, moreover withdrawing with 5 emblems every single time. Now, Lin Shi already had 9 successive 5 emblem withdrawals, and according to what Li Wu said, Lin Shi truly broke the time record in the direct spear strikes trial. Even though his daily performance in the Blade and Spear Stone Temple wasn't as astonishing as when he was in the direct spear strike Stone Temple, still more than 40 steps remaining from the rear gate of the Stone Temple, Vice Principal Xia and Xiao Mingxian naturally concluded that this was because of Su Xinhua's extra special training, leaving his body unbearably fatigued. In summary, Lin Shi's performance still greatly exceeded both his and Xiao Mingxuan's expectations. When those who one viewed like their own children performed even better than what they expected, this was obviously something worth being happy over, worth drinking a cup over. Xiao Mingxian and Vice Principal Xia, the two of them didn't even mention Lu Ziyu. It was because according to Lin Shi's performance, his arrangement with Lu Ziyu was already something that completely lacked suspense. Yan Xiaoqing's group, their carriage, there are still 2 days before it arrives, right? After tearing a piece of smoked jerky that was being roasted on the side and chewing on it, Vice Principal Xia poured a cup of wine, looking at Xiao Mingxian while asking. Xiao Mingxian shook his head. He gave the smoked meat that had both an alluring color and fragrance a look, and then looked at his own chubby body with a worried expression. In the end, with a bit of annoyance, he only poured himself a cup of wine, saying, "There are still 3 days." They encountered a mudslide along the way. Clearing up the road took up a day. Vice Principal Xia nodded. He looked at Xiao Mingxian in a simple and direct manner, speaking 4 words, "What do you think?" Zhan Taimang's and my assessment are the same, it definitely won't be any inferior to those old fellas in the imperial city. Great Mang state treasuries have already been used considerably, some sealed grain depots already being opened as well, the numbers great. This can only mean one thing, which is to prepare provisions for the troops defending the borders. Xiao Mingxuan's fat finger lightly tapped the edge of the wine cup, his round face a bit annoyed as he said, "Thunder Academy even has quite a few people entering Heaven Ascension Mountain range to train themselves, which is why the Emperor has completely become anxious, losing patience." With Zhan Taimang's aggressive stance, the Emperor will definitely have some more excuses. When the time comes, if we want to have an advantage in negotiations with the Emperor, I fear that we will have to have the upper hand on Thunder Academy first. Otherwise, with the Emperor's current attitude, our Green Luan Academy can naturally refuse, but Yun Qin won't be able to withstand the price. There are 3 more days. If Lin Shi is given a 4th day of time, he should be able to attack at Blade and Spear Trials record. Vice Principal Xia's voice sunk, and then he turned around to Xiao Mingxian, saying, "I will make some arrangements. After 4 days, let's see what the best of Thunder Academy's new students are like. Help me keep an eye on Western Borders Army, Honorable Tsang Yu will most likely become restless as well." "Sure." Xiao Mingxian lowered the wine glass in his hands. He was just about to get up, but he suddenly slapped himself fiercely as if giving himself punishment, his entire left cheek becoming red from the strike. "There were too many matters recently, my memory is no longer as good as before, almost forgetting one of the most important matters. A trusted individual from inside Tongcang Imperial Palace has sent out news, wishing to use Gu Xinin to exchange for Nan Gongmo." When he said this, his voice was even shaking a bit, blaming himself a bit for not immediately mentioning this. Vice Principal Xia's breathing also stopped slightly, but a rare gloomy frost immediately covered his face. He shook his head. "This price isn't enough. This price isn't enough." His mind also seemed to have been shaken quite a bit. After repeating this line, he looked at Xiao Mingxian, and with a sunken voice, said, Tansang's people definitely think that because we are aware of the unbearable suffering Gu Shinin has experienced over these years, we will definitely immediately exchange for his return. However, it is precisely because we know they used many methods to torment him, wishing to learn many secrets from his mouth, precisely because of the many years of suffering he has endured, that this price is far from enough. Xiao Mingxian remained silent for a long time. Then, he said, what if they changed their mind? Since they couldn't learn anything from Gu Shinin's mouth, Gu Shinin isn't very useful to them. Moreover, they wish to learn some secrets from Nan Gongmo. That is why you should only tell them that I want Gu Shinin to be able to speak and jump, properly come back alive. Similarly, I will also properly return Nan Gongmo to them, but this price is still not enough. Vice Principal Xia took a deep breath, and then he looked at Xiao Mingxian, saying, even if Gu Shinin hears that we refuse this proposal this time, he will understand that this is the price for these past few years that we were seeking him. Xiao Mingxian nodded, no longer saying anything else. He turned around, walking out of this small courtyard. Who is this silver fox? He is so formidable, why did he suddenly come out of nowhere? It's rumored that the charge of Spirit Vulture on this ranking was ended precisely under his hands. Also, that Golden Sunflower's successive record was also ended under his hands. The area around the ranking signboard outside the training valley was full of activity. It was because all of the new students discovered that during the past few days, there was suddenly a silver fox who appeared. Moreover, this silver fox's climb was extremely astonishing, actually another 5 emblem withdrawal achievement added each day. After 9 days, he already withdrew with 9 successive 5 emblem withdrawals. When we calculate the time, this silver fox began his successive victories when 90 Gene Heaven's Choice and Brother Lu made their agreement. Say, do you think this silver fox is that self-defense department's 90 Gene Heaven's Choice? A tall and sturdy-looking medicine department Golden Spoon youngster said loudly here, full of ridicule. This medicine department Golden Spoon youngster was named Guing Lang, precisely one of the people who spoke out on that mountain path, berated Lin Shi. My ass. If even someone like him can win so many times in succession, then the sun really will rise from the west. If that happens, I'll eat this signboard. An arrogant and haughty self-defense department youngster released a loud snort. It was precisely Mu Shanzi. Ha! Guing Lang couldn't help but roar with laughter. Even though Mu Shanzi said, my ass to him, his tone rather crude, Mu Shanzi's stance also rather aggressive, not something he was normally used to. Now that these two's viewpoints were similar, the two naturally found each other more and more pleasing to the eye. When Xuanyu came out, the area in front of the signboard immediately became quiet. Mu Shanzi's brows furrowed, seeing a pale-faced, entire body soaked when Xuanyu slowly walked out from the valley. While ignoring everyone else's gazes, when Xuanyu, this youngster who was internally arrogant to the extreme, after giving the signboard a look, slowly and silently left. Could it be that it really is him? Silver Fox. When Xuanyu clenched his fists, and then loosened them. The students in front of the signboard only felt that he might be too much of a recluse and too arrogant, none of them thinking that right now, he actually only had this thought in his head. 1. Great Mang Dynasty's Emperor. Chapter Volume 322. That Internal Study Department student. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Almost everyone was guessing just who the ranked Silver Fox was, but no matter how everyone's discussions went, Silver Fox's achievements still increased at the rate of 1 per day, not missing a single day. 10 5 emblem withdrawal achievements. 11 5 emblem withdrawal achievements. 12 5 emblem withdrawal achievements. When Silver Fox reached 12 5 emblem withdrawal achievements, the only ones ranked above Silver Fox were the 13 successive 5 emblem withdrawals Thunder Python, as well as the 14 successive achievements Firefly. When night fell, the yellow stone temples in the yellow perimeter walls were all extremely quiet. Strand after strand of yellow sunlight shone through these simple and unadorned stone temples, providing quite the unique scene. Lin Shi and Jiang Xiaoyi appeared before the blade and spear stone temple entrance again. The two both had 5 golden pentagon emblems on their shoulders, which was to say that after they left today, Lin Shi's achievement would become 13 successive 5-emblem withdrawals. Ever since he encountered Spirit Vulture, Lin Shi prioritized 5-emblem withdrawals, using the 10-minute time rewind ability quite a few times when facing opponents. That was why his progress in this stone temple naturally became considerably slower than in the direct spear strikes trial. However, during these 2 weeks, Lin Shi's fighting strength still made quite the substantial progress. After 5 successive 5-emblem withdrawals, Lin Shi did as Nkei suggested. He used his course point of reward, together with the point he got from the direct spear strikes trial, but didn't use yet, to exchange for a mountain sea clove pill. Right now, his true cultivation was already approaching mid-level Soul Knight, able to easily raise a heavy object weighing 180 jin. His archery also already reached a level where he could hit a target 100 steps out while running. 3 or 4 of his arrows would hit the bullseye, while the remaining arrows wouldn't be too far off either. If he was standing still, in a situation where he could calmly fire arrows, there would be almost no deviations when shooting at stationary targets. As for the Braves layer training Su Xingma gave him, even though he was still using the green-edged sword each day, the number of times he had to draw the sword has already reached 1,300 times. On top of this, apart from the green Luan sword drawing motion he used at the start, he also added the upward thrust form and reverse slash form. These 3 forms were precisely the 3 killing sword forms when one's figure was displaced, the most useful when fighting on the battlefield. Meanwhile, while fighting against opponents of all different levels these days, Lin Shi also incorporated some killing techniques he learned from Nkei into these sword forms. The reason why Green Luan Academy is a holy land in Yunqin Empire is because Green Luan Academy's professors, lecturers and other people are powerful. Just a short period of teaching from normal lecturers, and the result might be 10 times, perhaps even several dozen times that of the teachings of ordinary cultivators. Moreover, Su Xingma, Tong Wei, and Nkei, they were the very best of the Academy's younger generation to begin with. Their comprehension, movement techniques, even the most basic vest for training Lin Shi's balance brought Lin Shi tremendous benefits. With Lin Shi's current cultivation, if he didn't exhaust too much strength and soul force, the past Spirit Vulture really might not be his opponent. The past 3 days, Lin Shi obtained his 5-emblem achievements completely by relying on his own strength, always investing his 10-minute time rewind ability into the blade and spear stone temples training. In the end, he didn't disappoint Vice Principal Xia, who was watching him closely within the secluded small courtyard. This was because just yesterday, he already truly passed through this stone temple, opening the bronze rear gate of this stone temple. However, Self-Defense Department's record was 60.7 breaths, struck by 1 blade and 2 spears, and he passed yesterday with more than 70 breaths, stopping twice, hit by 3 blades and 4 spears in total. Moreover, this was still after experiencing the extremely severe Windstalker special training, his entire body a bit sore. This was the reason why the true record-breaking attempt was today. Meanwhile, for the sake of breaking this blade and spear record, Lin Shi also specially told Tong Wei about this. Tong Wei also agreed. In today's afternoon Windstalker special training, he only had Lin Shi familiarize himself a bit with the new, revolving flower release form. That was why, apart from his arms being a bit sore right now, his current condition could be said to be optimal. Moreover, with his experience of passing once already, this gloomy stone temple no longer seemed that scary. That was why right now, Lin Shi was full of confidence. Qin Xie indeed felt that as a heaven's choice of this academy, he didn't know shame, loving comfort and hating work, not putting in any effort at all, but what she didn't know was that because of his persistent personality, because of the ability he shared with Principal Zhang, he worked harder than anyone else, suffered more than anyone else. I hope you succeed. Jiang Xiaoyi patted Lin Shi's armor, and then said this loudly. Lin Shi smiled and said, I should be able to succeed. Jiang Xiaoyi also couldn't help but chuckle as well. He looked at Lin Shi, changing his words. You will definitely succeed. During this period, he had personally watched Lin Shi challenge the trial many times. In particular, from watching Lin Shi challenge the direct spear strikes to the blade and spear trial, he learned many things. At the same time, he became more and more certain that Lin Shi was someone he was going to look up to and learn from his entire life. However, Li Wu's words that day also woke him up, realizing that even though he couldn't shine as brilliantly as this brilliant moon, he could similarly release his own light. That was why right now, his attitude towards Lin Shi was one of looking up to and pursuit, but he didn't feel inferior, only feeling lucky and proud that he was of the same generation as Lin Shi, that they were fellow students, and that they might go into battle together one day. Lin Shi moved, starting his challenge. Compared to the first time he entered the direct spear strikes trial, his movements were twice as fast, completely giving one the feeling of lightning, his toes as if they were walking on water surface. The sound of machinery moving could be heard. When the long blades and spears shot out aggressively, pierced at him, he already rushed out 7 whole steps in the temple. The black longsword in his hands flew about like wind and rain, only briefly making contact with the long blades and pikes that were about to hit him, definitely not wasting any strength. This was a scene that was full of a fantasy martial artist feeling. A black figure ran like lightning, long blades and pikes falling down on him like rain, many brushing past his body, but they didn't affect his advance in the slightest. Only after continuously crossing 120 steps, was Lin Shi's calf struck by an extremely treacherous blade, and then he was knocked onto the ground by a long spear's thrust. However, he didn't stop for too long either, quickly standing back up. After falling 4 times in succession, Lin Shi already reached the bronze stone temple rear gate. Even though he was already approaching his limit, all of his muscles shaking, twitching with pain, the black longsword also feeling heavy to the extreme, he still felt extremely happy inside. It was because this time, he relied completely on his own ability to get this far. Diligence and suffering that exceeded all of the new students also brought him abundant returns, resulting in such a fast cultivation speed. Return. After touching the ice-cold and heavy bronze door, Lin Shi coughed and panted while shouting this word. The attacks began again. Lin Shi's condition returned to its peak. He rushed forward with a speed that left even the hidden Li Wu a bit horrified, his entire body like flowing calligraphy, as if no amount of men and horses could stop him. After rushing out 120 steps, that extremely treacherous long blade aimed at his knee was avoided with a perfectly timed step, his figure not pausing in the slightest. After 160 steps, a black flower pike that stabbed down diagonally from behind was knocked aside by a reverse/form strike. 170 steps, 180 steps, there was still not a single blade or spear that could land on his body. When there were only 10 final steps left, a scene that left both Jiang Xiaoyi and Li Wu speechless appeared. Lin Shi's body flew out once again, as if he was duty-bound. Another black flower bloomed in the gloomy great hall. This time, there was a black long blade that hacked down on his body, but he wasn't as miserable as last time in the air, able to adjust his own body extremely. One final slash hacked out fiercely, as if he was a great general who leapt off his horse, smashing down on the bronze gate. Dang! Under this full-powered slash, together with Lin Shi's forward momentum, the repeatedly tempered 3-layered black longsword actually bent in a semi-circular manner under the bronze door, almost breaking. However, this heavy bronze door, under this blow, after a muffled noise, gradually opened. Sunset radiance scattered in, cast upon the steadily landing Lin Shi's black armor, making him look incredibly splendid. Huff! Lin Shi released a breath of relief. He gave the scene outside the bronze door a look, behind it still the same old weeds and stone temple, yet in his eyes, it was still an extremely beautiful scenery. He gradually turned around, seeing Li Wu walk over from within the spacious stone temple. He gave him a sincere bow without any arrogance, and then with a bit of excitement, asked, "Teacher, how much time did I use to pass this trial?" Li Wu looked at Lin Shi, who was holding a slightly bent black longsword, seriously returning the greeting and saying, 50.9 breaths, hit by one blade. In his heart, Lin Shi was already comparable to an extremely capable person. That was why, even though he was still a student, this was already someone worthy of his respect. Still a bit slower than that internal study department fella, but it is already much faster than self-defense department's record. Lin Shi smiled in a happy and satisfied manner. He remembered extremely clearly that self-defense department's record was 60.7 breaths, hit by one blade and two spears. You broke self-defense department's record, so you've obtained another point in reward. Together with your recent successive 5 emblem withdrawal achievements course point that you haven't exchanged yet, you have 2 points of reward you can use in total. Li Wu accepted the small cowhide scroll from the hands of Jiang Xiaoyi, who had just walked over, starting to amend the records. When he saw that Li Wu didn't have anything special to tell him, Lin Shi gave him another respectful bow, and then prepared to leave this place, meanwhile taking a look at just what kind of training the next stone temple held for him, and then returning a bit faster. It was because he already told lecturer Mu Qing that tomorrow, he had to once again head deep into Heaven Ascension Mountain Range in the early morning for his wilderness survival course, and this time, it would last a bit longer. Because they couldn't bring any personal items on this wilderness survival class, the new students who had undergone last time's experience would definitely do their best to eat a bit more, be a bit fuller. If he returned too late, he might not even be able to fill his belly, making the following coursework much more difficult. However, when he had already walked through the bronze rear door, he looked at the already slightly bent black longsword in his hands, and then remembered the big bump on his head last time. Lin Shi laughed, and then couldn't help but turn around, asking in a bit of a childish manner, "Teacher, last time, you said I was the first one to smash open the door with my head, then this time, am I the first one to hack at this door with a sword?" "You are not." Li Wu in the gloomy stone temple suddenly trembled without any reason. He slowly shook his head. "You are the second." "The second." Lin Shi stared blankly, but his mind immediately lit up, saying with shock, "Don't tell me the first was the internal study department student with the best record." Li Wu, who was standing in the gloomy stone temple, didn't say anything, only nodding silently. "Is he a senior who has already graduated a long time ago? Where is he?" Jiang Xiaoyi also became curious. Only after blurting this out, did he realize that this was a bit unsuitable, thus asking apologetically, "Teacher, can you talk about this?" "I can only tell you that he is still alive." Li Wu took a deep breath, his fingernails, due to excessive force, stabbed into his flesh, but this was naturally not something Lin Shi or Jiang Xiaoyi could see. After taking a deep breath and saying this, he then slowly said, "Perhaps in the future, you all will meet him." Chapter Volume 323. Academy's Pride and Attitude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Wu's words still didn't reveal too much, the gloomy stone temple also hiding the changes in expression on Li Wu's face. However, Lin Shi instead still keenly sensed the severity of his words, feeling like this internal study department senior who had already graduated was definitely not someone normal. Moreover, Li Wu's tone only carried a heaviness, not a trace of unhappiness. Thus, Lin Shi knew that this internal study senior was a heroic figure truly deserving of respect, and right now, he might be in a predicament. For Vice Principal Xia, Lin Shi was still a child who needed to be cherished, someone who still had to continue down this path filled with high hopes. He could take on a suitable amount of pressure, but he definitely wouldn't allow this new student to come into contact with too much darkness. That was why the amount of things Lin Shi knew wasn't too much, and he naturally didn't know that a day ago, the carriages that set out from Central Continent's Imperial City already made their way through Four Seasons Plains, arriving at the foot of Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. At this time, Yan Shaoqing, Government Sector's No. 2 figure, Feng Qianhan, Justice Sector's Great Commander, and Yi Xiaofeng, the up-and-coming young representative of Central Continent Guards, were currently drinking tea in a palace within Green Lawn Academy. This hall was extremely large, the dozen giant vermilion pillars supporting this main hall extremely thick. The green stone bricks covering the ground were like a limitless river, the width and height comparable to a 3- or 4-story palace elsewhere, yet in this great hall, there were only a few chairs, making it seem exceptionally spacious. Diovico, the tea was made from the pure glaciers of Heaven Ascension mountain range, the tea leaves coming from some small leaf cliff tea plants that grew naturally on some of the academy's precipices. The tea was sweet, beautiful, and clear, together with the figures of some snowy mountains outside the window that carried a bit of a mysterious aura. It made one feel as if this tea and the scenery were naturally and intimately related, as if they expounded upon some type of life philosophy. Government Sector's number 2 figure, Yan Shaoqing, had an extremely handsome appearance. If Lin Shi were to see him, he would definitely feel like he looked a bit like the past Jing Shaoqiu, but this middle-aged man also had a bit of a refined aura of antiquity unique to this world. On his head was a green government official cap, the square emerald embedded within and the white mandarin duck gazing upon the moon diagram on his green official uniform even more so clearly stating his identity. His official uniform and imperial boots were a bit stained, but he didn't seem to notice this at all, this type of calmness making the dirtiness on him instead be overlooked by others, making others instead feel that he was extremely tidy. Feng Qianhan wore a great commander bright moon armor that was woven out of bright moon crystal and black gold threads. Moreover, the half-palm-sized crystals covered the surface of his armor and the stitching inside, the extremely powerful black gold threads impossible to see from the outside. Together with the bright moon crystal's unique white brilliance and the finely carved crescent moon runes, this made the already entirely white Feng Qianhan look like an icy war god dressed in a layer of frost. He, who had the greatest seniority and experienced countless battles, naturally carried a type of terrifying presence and military ruthlessness, was originally the one with the worst temper out of the three here, his temperament the most explosive, but right now, even though his brows were furrowed, the way he sipped his tea was still extremely patient. The only one who had already lost his patience was the youngest of the three, Yi Shaofeng. This place wasn't Central Continent's imperial city, he didn't have the duty of guarding the city, so he could dress casually, yet he still wore a set of white tiger armor, the white leather armor wrapping tightly around his sturdy body, drawing out rock-like icy cold lines. Tiger patterned like runes wrapped around the armor, converging at his head. A war helm that was identical to the head of a tiger covered a larger half of his head, only revealing his young, prestigious, and angered face. He picked up the teacup, lowered it, and then picked it up again, only to lower it once more. After repeating this several times, he finally couldn't endure it anymore. He stared into the limits of the green brick floor, at a black-robed lecturer standing next to the door, saying with a sunken voice, "Just when will Vice Principal Xia come?" The black-robed lecturer standing by the door had an appearance that looked to be around 30.6 or 7, his figure slim. His hair was bound with a hemp rope, looking a bit dried yellow. Apart from the black robes covering his body, his appearance was just like that of an ordinary villager, extremely ordinary. When he heard Yi Shaofeng ask this with a sunken voice, this black-robed lecturer's eyelids didn't even jump, shaking his head in a manner that wasn't too rushed or too slow, saying, "I do not know." "You don't know?" This black-robed lecturer's calm attitude made Yi Shaofeng's expression immediately turn even more icy cold. He looked at this black-robed lecturer, saying with a cold voice, "Isn't your Green One Academy just putting on a bit too much airs? We already waited a day of time, just how much longer do you wish for us to wait? You have to understand that it isn't us who wish to see your academy's people, what we represent is the decree of the current emperor." When he heard these words, Yan Shaking instead smiled inwardly, knowing that there really was a generation gap between Central Continent's young guards and the rest of them. Moreover, after residing in Imperial City for a long time, even though he knew that Green One Academy was worth respecting, he still naturally lacked a share of respect, which was why he didn't truly understand why Green One Academy was so proud, or for what reason they could remain proud. These words, "in Green One Academy," really seemed a bit laughable, but he also understood that the reason Zhou Shoufu arranged for Yi Xiaofeng to come to Green Luan Academy was precisely to let this vigorous new wave pick up the respect they ought to have, moreover let this new wave understand the Academy's true pride and strength. Thus, he remained clear-headed the entire time, only listening with interest, not speaking a word. Feng Qianhan's thoughts were even more simple. This type of stupid and overbearing youngster deserved to be taught a lesson, so he instead only released a heavy snort, adding to Yi Xiaofeng's anger. Those are your own affairs. Just like Yan Shaoqing predicted, this villager-like, extremely ordinary black-robed lecturer didn't bat an eyelid, still speaking in a way that wasn't too fast or too slow. What did you say? Yi Xiaofeng's body suddenly shook, his expression immediately turning pale. He already used the emperor's name, yet the other party instead remained completely unmoved, not even paying the emperor's decree any attention. Could it be that you don't even place the current emperor in your eyes? He stared straight at this black-robed lecturer, just unable to understand where the other party's arrogance and pride came from. The dry yellow-haired, ordinary-faced black-robed lecturer raised his head slightly. He gave Yi Xiaofeng a look, his eyes completely filled with indifference and mockery. Even if the emperor himself personally came, whether or not an audience is to be granted is completely up to Vice Principal Xia's decision. Could it be that you wish to make this decision? That is why whether or not he wishes to meet with you all, it is up to him. Meanwhile, whether or not you all wish to wait, this is precisely your own matter. Yi Xiaofeng was first shocked, and then he became furious. He suddenly stood up, his gaze like blades as he stared at this black-robed lecturer. You truly are daring. Don't tell me that your intention is that not even the current emperor is as respected as Vice Principal Xia. How you all think is up to you, it has nothing to do with me. Once again, the black-robed lecturer didn't even bat an eyelid, speaking in a manner which was neither servile nor overbearing. After a slight pause, the black-robed lecturer still didn't give Yi Xiaofeng a single look. Moreover, you are only a Central Continent Guard leader, you can go back and order around your people in Central Continent's guards, but you are not someone from the academy, you cannot order me to do anything. Just like right now, my job is simply to wait here, if I am unwilling, I can completely choose to not say anything to you. When they heard the black-robed lecturer's words, Yan Shaoqing and Feng Qianhan both inwardly sighed. The two of them understood that to begin with giving them a cold shoulder here, was precisely an attitude the academy expressed extremely clearly. Moreover now, it seemed like the academy's attitude was much more forceful than they had even anticipated. This meant that they would likely have to wait many more days. Moreover, what left them feeling the most helpless was that they knew that the first reply the academy would give them would definitely be a refusal, but for the sake of receiving this reply from the academy, they still waited, and then they had to wait again for the following mediation. However, Yi Xiaofeng didn't understand this, he still believed that since they came with Yunqin Emperor's decree, then Green Luan Academy had to immediately receive it. That was why right now, when he heard the black-robed lecturer's words, he immediately erupted into a great rage, fiercely taking a step out. While looking at this black-robed lecturer who he found incredibly presumptuous, he said with a stern voice, "Then if I wish to fight with you right now, will that be something between me and you? This will indeed be something between the two of us." The black-robed lecturer was momentarily distracted, and then immediately afterwards, he looked straight at Yi Xiaofeng, asking with a calm and indifferent voice, "However, I am only a statecraft department lecturer, my strength among all of the lecturers in Green Luan Academy close to the bottom. Do you truly wish to fight with me?" Yi Xiaofeng instead laughed out of extreme anger. "In this academy, even if you really aren't a match, there is no way I would truly seriously injure you. Moreover, even if it is a senseless battle, it will still be much more comfortable than waiting here." This extremely ordinary-looking black-robed lecturer shook his head, a hint of an expression of mockery appearing at the corners of his lips. He also felt it was beneath him to say any more, only waving his sleeves, making a "come-at-me" gesture. Yi Xiaofeng's body bent slightly, first giving this black-robed lecturer a greeting, and then he didn't say anything else either. The runes on his white tiger armor all released dazzling white light, and then his figure rushed out like a brightly colored fierce tiger in the great hall, instantly arriving in front of the black-robed lecturer. There was no technique at all, only an overbearing kick descended from above, trampling down towards this black-robed lecturer's head. Yunqin was an empire that revered military skill, worshipped the courageous. That was why after the initial display of etiquette, as soon as the battle began, taking down the enemy became the objective. Meanwhile, the other party's previous attitude already completely infuriated him. That was why as soon as Yi Xiaofeng took action, he didn't hold back at all. Under his stomp, a crazy gale erupted, making the clothes on the black-robed lecturer's body flutter intensely. This stomp could be said to be ferocious to the extreme. Moreover, the moment Yi Xiaofeng's foot stomped down, his other leg already bent slightly, ready to deliver a kick at any time, completely ready to deal with any follow-up movements from the black-robed lecturer. However, his pupils instead immediately contracted. It was because when facing this extremely ferocious stomp, this black-robed lecturer didn't have any intentions of dodging. He only raised his head in the crazy wind, slightly narrowing his eyes. Ping! The black-robed lecturer's body curved slightly, and then he suddenly straightened his body. He actually used his own right shoulder to forcibly take on Yi Xiaofeng's trample that was enough to crush stone and break armor. Yellow light and white light erupted from his shoulder. Following a tremendous noise, his body sunk under the tremendous force, the green bricks under his feet completely shattered, both of his feet entering the green brick rubble. His face also immediately became a bit more pale, but at the same time, even greater pride and ridicule appeared on his face. Both his hands actually grabbed the foot Yi Xiaofeng stepped down on his body with, and then took hold of it firmly. Then, with a ferocious turn of his body, his legs rushed into the air. Like a rabbit that was grabbed by a falcon, he used all of his strength, both his feet kicking outwards, smashing into the sole of Yi Xiaofeng's other foot. When one foot stomped down on the black-robed lecturer's shoulder, Yi Xiaofeng's other foot was already kicking towards the black-robed lecturer's face. The difference between his cultivation and the black-robed lecturer's didn't seem to be that great, one foot already wounded this black-robed lecturer. However, when the black-robed lecturer's feet rushed out, pressing against the soles of his feet, his expression instantly became extremely pale as well, feeling bone-fracturing noises sounding from the groin area of that entire leg almost losing feeling. Meanwhile, in Yan Shaoqing and Feng Qianhan's eyes, Yi Xiaofeng's attack was originally a tiger stomping down, but at this moment, it instead became the black-robed lecturer viciously tearing apart his body. Under a tremendous noise, Yi Xiaofeng backed up, landing on the ground, the intense pain from the sole of his feet and groin making it completely impossible for him to stand back up. However, the black-robed lecturer wasn't sent flying. The moment his legs stamped viciously against the soles of Yi Xiaofeng's feet, his hands already seemed to have become eagle claws, tearing viciously at the foot Yi Xiaofeng aimed at his face. While bearing this tearing force, he instead threw himself over with his entire body, rolling over, still sticking to Yi Xiaofeng's body. His right shoulder was already hanging down, the strike just now also already worsening his arm's condition, losing fighting strength. However, his left hand's forefinger and middle finger were instead already straight like a blade, jabbing into Yi Xiaofeng's throat. Please be lenient. When they saw this scene, the expressions of Yan Shaoqing and Feng Qianhan, who originally only intended to watch this scene play out with amusement, changed greatly, crying out in alarm. They clearly understood that every single lecturer in the academy had their own arrogance, all of them having powerful strength the outside world didn't understand. However, they still never expected this black-robed lecturer's actions to be fierce to this degree. The black-robed lecturer's two fingers pressed against Yi Xiaofeng's throat, and then his entire body curled backwards, rolling back in a rather unattractive manner. Only after rolling more than 10 times along the ground like a sphere, did he get back up. Meanwhile, Yi Xiaofeng's body was completely rigid as he laid on the ground. On his throat were two faint red fingerprints. In his throat, there was a thick bloodiness that was surging. This black-robed lecturer's cultivation wasn't all that astonishing, about the same as Yi Xiaofeng's. Both of them had high-stage soul master cultivation. When soul masters of similar levels fought, it should be extremely difficult to break through their defenses before either side's soul force was exhausted too heavily. However, just like Su Xinhua told Lin Shi and all of the other new students in the first class, the human body had many weak points. Even when both sides were soul masters, the throat was precisely one of these weak points, unable to stop the jab of two solid fingers. Chapter Volume 324. To each their own. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Xiaofeng stood rigidly in this hall. There was blood in his throat, his heart filled with indescribable bitterness. This black-robed lecturer didn't have any intention of truly killing him. That was why when the two fingertips pressed against his throat, they quickly retracted, leaving a bit of injury on his throat. Cultivators at the high soul master level were already extremely stunning in the outside world. However, even he knew that in this Green Luan Academy, this level wasn't much. Even so, it was precisely because this black-robed lecturer only had soul master level cultivation, the same as himself, that it made him feel even worse inside. The other party said that he was only a statecraft department lecturer, his strength among all of Green Luan Academy's lecturers considered bottom rung. These words now seemed to be true. However, as a heroic figure among Imperial City's new wave, he normally rarely encountered his match among cultivators of the same level, yet he couldn't defeat a statecraft department lecturer whose strength wasn't astonishing at all in Green Luan Academy. Moreover, he was immediately dispatched of by the other party, lost in such a distressing manner, defeated so directly. Originally, when the other side specially said those words, it wasn't because he was scared of facing him, but rather to remind him that losing to a lecturer who was bottom rung in fighting strength within Green Luan Academy, would make him lose even more face. The other party's shoulder clearly suffered quite the considerable damage as well, but if this was a true battle on the battlefield, the result would be that the other side could still fight, while he himself would already be dead. While looking at that black-robed lecturer who still returned to his post by the door, Yi Xiaofeng finally understood why the other side was so arrogant, why Green Luan Academy was so prideful. It was because even cultivators of the same level, the ones from Green Luan Academy and those of the outside world, were completely different. The Academy's pride was still established on powerful strength and confidence. That was why overwhelming Green Luan Academy's strength was the only way, or else it was impossible to get rid of Green Luan Academy's inherent pride. After standing rigidly for a moment, Yi Xiaofeng, who now understood much of the reasoning, forcefully swallowed the bloodiness and bitterness in his throat. He gave the black-robed lecturer who stood quietly by the door a bow, and then said, "I was able to learn many things from Mr. today. If there is a chance in the future, I still wish to seek further guidance from Mr. However, all of the territory belongs to the Emperor. No matter how powerful you are still the Emperor's subjects. If all powerful individuals were inordinately proud of their own abilities, my Yunqin, would it still be the current Yunqin?" The black-robed lecturer didn't look at Yi Xiaofeng, also feeling it was beneath him to speak. Only, inwardly, he was thinking, "This is just your way of thinking. What does it have to do with me? You are still too young in the end, all of the territory belongs to the Emperor." This line is indeed correct, however, half of the mountains and rivers of this Yunqin, who was it that seized them? The black-robed lecturer didn't say anything, but a smile of mockery instead appeared on the corners of Yan Shaoqing and Feng Qianhan's mouth. They were inwardly thinking that the Emperor indeed wanted control over Green Luan Academy, but if Green Luan Academy really didn't care about the rest of the world, who would be able to stop them? Moreover, if Principal Zhang was in Green Luan Academy, not even the current Emperor would dare have these types of thoughts, to have Green Luan Academy hand over those recipes and cultivation methods. That was why all of this, in the end, still depended on the wishes of Green Luan Academy itself. That was why they could only wait. In reality, even Yan Shaoqing, who had the reputation of a genius in Imperial City when he was just 20 years old, inwardly always felt that trying to interfere with Green One Academy was an extremely nonsensical and preposterous thing. However, the further he climbed, the more things he came into contact with, making him understand more and more why the Emperor on the Dragon Throne, why those figures behind the layers of curtains who, regardless of whether it was their strategic or plotting skills were far above his own, would always try to do this nonsensical thing. It was because Green One Academy was too powerful, and too arrogant. Who can say for sure that even though the Academy's current people wouldn't interfere with imperial power, there won't be any changes in the future? In this world, all things changed like a flowing stream, while the human heart was even more so one of the hardest things to guess at in this world. If Yunqin Empire's court counselors were asked about this, the overwhelming majority would say that Green One Academy definitely wouldn't do anything unfavorable for Yunqin Empire. However, perhaps not a single one could guarantee that Green One Academy would remain like this forever, and perhaps no one would dare guarantee that Green One Academy would always be loyal to the Emperor. They had to rely on them, but also had to be on guard. This was something extremely contradictory to begin with. Twilight descended upon Jiren One Academy. After the long dark night passed, the glimmers of dawn once again surrounded this holy land of the Empire, shining upon that lofty and unadorned, celestial palace-like hall. On Green One Academy's peaks, it was already early summer. However, in most of the other areas in Heaven Ascension mountain range, the weather was still extremely cold, the plant life a dried yellow. Lin Shi and all of the other Self-Defense Department new students had already set off before the first glimmer of dawn descended upon Green One Academy, advancing into a mountain range to the northwest of Green One Academy. Just like before, they only had a day's worth of fresh water, the black cloak that could block wind chill, as well as a stench egg they could only use when facing extreme danger. The stench egg was a sphere the Academy created from several types of unique medicinal herbs. Just by crushing the outer shell, there would be surging yellow smoke, used as a communication tool. Because the size was similar to that of a chicken egg, the strong smell also extremely foul, the Academy students normally called it the stench egg. At this time, the wilderness survival course continued as arranged. This would continue for 7 days of time. The first 2 days were used to rush to the survival region, half-snow-gray plains, and then afterwards, Lin Shi and the others had to spend 3 days in this completely unfamiliar environment, and then use 2 days of time to hurry back. Because they were free to move on their own, and ever since this morning, all food had to be found on one's own. Moreover, the course's rules were that any food they discovered could only be used by themselves. A large group moving together wasn't a sensible choice. As such, the Self-Defense Department new students were scattered apart, entering the wilderness like a web. Even Lin Shi, Tang Ku, Hua Jiyue, and the others had a few hundred steps of distance between them, advancing while searching for things they could eat. However, when they had just made their way around the Academy's farthest northwestern peak, officially entered the expanse of yellow, dry grass wasteland outside Green One Academy, Lin Shi and all of these dispersed Self-Defense Department new students were immediately stunned. There were large groups of similarly fragmented new students who had just put on their black cloaks ahead of them, appearing one after another in their line of sights, emerging in this waist-high dry yellow grass wasteland. Natural Arts Department. There are people from statecraft too, even those from internal study. What is going on? Why did they all come out too? Lin Shi stopped in the wasteland, a bit stunned. Then, among these people who were getting closer and closer, he saw quite a few people he was familiar with. The chubby Meng Bai, the extremely earnest Zhang Ping, even some students from the medicine department. When he looked in the direction of medicine department's people, Lin Shi quickly recognized Gao Yanan and Jiang Yue. Why did you all hurry over here so early in the morning? Where are you all headed? Lin Shi quickly greeted Meng Bai who hurried over, asking with a bit of a puzzled but happy expression. What, you all didn't know? Meng Bai's face was completely sullen, a bit out of breath as he looked at Lin Shi, replying, this time, it isn't only your self-defense department, all of the departments have to carry out this long and difficult wilderness survival training. Lin Shi patted Meng Bai's shoulder, saying, then are you all also hurrying towards half-snow gray plains with us? Meng Bai wasn't as excited as he usually was when he ran into Lin Shi at all, bitterly nodding, yeah. I feel like this isn't really fair. Lin Shi, this is a compulsory course of your self-defense department, and you guys already experienced this a few times before. This time, we have to look for things to eat in the same place as you guys, so how can we possibly beat you guys? Also, you can't even give me anything you find. When the time comes, won't your self-defense department have all eaten your fill, while the other departments all have to starve themselves? You want to eat your fill. You are thinking way too carefreely. Lin Shi laughed inside, but when he thought about how this would discourage Meng Bai further, he smiled, and then looked at Meng Bai, saying in consolation, don't worry, I'll teach you some things along the way. Also, from our past experiences, compared to Heaven Ascension Mountain Range's wasteland, we are just like ants. The key lies in being able to find things to eat ourselves. Having a department or two with us isn't too big of a deal. The wasteland really is big. Most of us students, during the survival coursework, didn't even run into each other. Only when we were heading back, would we see each other again. Zhang Ping. Right at this time, Zhang Ping also hurried over. Lin Shi greeted him with a smile. Ever since his reputation as 90 Gene Heaven's choice spread, most of the new students were scared of being involved with him at all. At this time, Zhang Ping rushed over and greeted him without any hesitation. This naturally represented true friendship. It was because Zhang Ping didn't just happen to choose the same elective course toxicology as Meng Bai did, so they already hadn't met each other for a long time. Compared to when he first entered the academy, Zhang Ping's skin seemed to have become a bit more tanned, but the aura he gave off instead appeared more steady and vigorous. Lin Shi, I've heard about your affair with Lu Ziyu as well. Do you really have confidence in surpassing him within a month? After exchanging greetings, Zhang Ping looked at Lin Shi with a bit of worry, directly asking. After waving towards Gao Yanan and Jiang Yuer who were currently walking over as well, Lin Shi looked at Zhang Ping, chuckled, and then asked softly, how is your current cultivation looking? Zhang Ping stared blankly for a moment, and then looked at Lin Shi in confusion, saying, roughly 150 gene, still quite far from mid-stage soul knight level. Lin Shi laughed, and then reached out his hand. Use all of your strength to clench my hand. Zhang Ping forcefully clenched his hand, and then immediately afterwards, a strange expression appeared on his face. Soon afterwards, he clearly used more strength, his face becoming slightly red, but Lin Shi continued to smile the entire time. Meanwhile, a completely amazed expression began to unfold across Zhang Ping's face. You purposely held back during the strength test. Why did you do that? After a few breaths of time passed, Zhang Ping took a deep breath, letting go of Lin Shi's hand. He looked at his own palm that had become slightly red, asking with a frown. Lin Shi retracted his completely unaffected hand, looking at Zhang Ping and said, if I told you that it was because the teacher who teaches us martial skill class doesn't like me, taking advantage of when I didn't have any strength left from training to test our strength, would you believe me? Zhang Ping's brows furrowed. Before he could say anything, Meng Bai immediately reacted, looking at Lin Shi with astonishment. Lin Shi, turns out you didn't really only have 90 gene of strength, then does that mean that you really can surpass Lu Ziyu? When he heard Meng Bai say this, Zhang Ping couldn't help but become a bit stunned. Meng Bai, you and Lin Shi see each other quite often, but you never asked about these things, only knowing now, are you not worried at all? What do you think is worth being concerned over the most then? Meng Bai's face became gloomy as he stared into the endless wasteland, mumbling, why does this stuff matter? What you have to be most concerned about is naturally if you can eat every day, if you can sleep well. Lin Shi couldn't help but release a pfft sound, laughing out loud. Indeed, if everyone in this world thought a bit simpler, then what was worth being concerned over the most, wasn't it just being able to eat your fill each day, if you could sleep well? Meng Bai, so you were thinking like this. However, I guarantee you that this fella definitely doesn't think that way. Li Kaiyun, who had just walked over, just happened to hear Meng Bai say these words, gesturing to the side. Following his gaze, Lin Shi saw a pale-faced youngster currently walking alone in the wasteland, his hair golden like midday sunshine, brilliant and dazzling. Lin Shi immediately recognized this person. He was Spiritual Sacrifice Department's Yuhua family's fella. Good wine and fine food will only dull the will and soul, courage and loyalty, scars and tempering, are the most dazzling glory. The thin and weak, pale-faced Yuhua Tianji separated himself from the academy students who were complaining about how they were definitely going to suffer in the days to come, repeating these words inside. He pulled out a few grassroots that could be used from a shallow water mud pit, then placed them into his mouth, slowly chewing on them. The bitterness and unpleasant taste for others, to him, was instead sweet like syrup. Chapter Volume 325. The more pivotal, the more patience is needed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hungry, so hungry. Meng Bai crawled up from a pile of hay within some big black stones. He was forcibly woken up from hunger. After 2 days of trekking, the students of various departments finally reached half-snow gray plains together with the self-defense department students. After arriving at half-snow gray plains, Meng Bai also finally understood why Lin Shi said that normally, when the self-defense department students had this class, most of the time, no one ran into each other. This half-snow gray plains was just like a curved natural harbor. According to what the academy lecturers said, everything between the northwest Heaven Ascension mountain range to their current side of the mountain range belonged to half-snow gray plains, all of them could move freely within. However, the distance between themselves and the northwestern side's Heaven Ascension mountain range really was too far, to the extent where they could only make out a very faint black outline of that extremely imposing main mountain range vein. Half of these enormous plains were above the snow line, covered with snow and all types of needle-leaf trees, the other half below the snow line where there were all types of frozen earth meadows, rugged valleys, and a jungle that stretched as far as the eye could see. If he didn't come together with Lin Shi this time, perhaps the second he arrived here, seeing this inhospitable natural environment, this completely uninhabited wasteland and tundra, he would have directly cried. This campsite was something Lin Shi helped them choose. It was far from the snow line, to the northwest of it was an expanse of pine wood that blocked mountain winds from that side, and there was even a creek nearby. Even though they already investigated yesterday, finding that there were basically no small fish inside, at the very least, drinking water wouldn't be an issue. The dry withered grass, together with some moss to cover it, could allow them to preserve their body temperatures better when they slept at night. Meanwhile, under Lin Shi's guidance, before Meng Bai and the others laid down, they buried some charcoal and stones in the earth, ensuring that they would always have warmth beneath them for the first half of the night. However, despite the already extremely experienced Lin Shi giving him a lot of help in these aspects, according to the Academy's regulations, all edible things had to be gathered or hunted by oneself. The rather timid Meng Bai naturally wouldn't dare challenge the authority of the Academy's lecturers and cheat. Meng Bai, who was roused awake by hunger, discovered that the sky had already brightened, while the areas where Lin Shi and the others were resting were also empty. They clearly already set out earlier to search for stuff. It had already been 10 hours since Meng Bai last ate anything. His returns last time weren't that small, finding 2 palm-sized drought turtles in an underbrush, so he was still able to eat quite a decent meal. Despite this being the case, since he didn't eat anything decent during the 2-day journey here, mostly eating various larvae and grassroots to allay his hunger, together with cultivators needing a lot of food to begin with, those small turtles only a tenth of his normal food quantity, he felt an unprecedented kind of hunger. The moment he woke up from hunger, Meng Bai already sensed his body's abnormalities. His body felt a bit cold, and it was shaking, a type of indescribable and strange flustered shaking. Meng Bai understood extremely clearly, this situation was an indicator of his stamina already unable to keep up due to his extreme hunger state. Hungry. He was just too hungry. The griping pain from his stomach roared like thunder, constantly reminding Meng Bai to eat something. It was to the extent where he wanted to pull up some nearby wild flowers and weeds and throw them into his mouth, but the remaining rationality in his brain told him that if he ate those things, he might just directly be half dead from diarrhea, leaving him with even greater suffering. His eyes stopped on the 2 tortoise shells that he had previously smashed apart by the bonfire. The meat on these 2 tortoise shells had long been completely licked clean, only some tougher skin left on the shells. However, despite this being the case, after forcefully swallowing his saliva, Meng Bai still placed this solid outer skin and 2 shells on the scorching hot charcoal, and then chewed with his teeth, used rocks to cut it. This hard skin that was completely burnt black, as tough as old leather, was completely swallowed down by Meng Bai. Now that he finally had something in his stomach, the flustered feeling becoming a bit better, Meng Bai carried a spear made from hardwood, and then walked towards the lower breaches of the nearby stream. According to what Lin Shi said yesterday, that region might very well have some bird species tracks. Gao Yanin quietly lowered her body, carefully examining the surrounding white cobresia that looked like it didn't have much water content, but was actually alive. Normally speaking, the plains and mountain forest below the snow line would have much more things that could be used. However, these half-snow gray plains had clearly been specially chosen by the academy lecturers. Most of the areas that were irrigated by rivers just happened to be rocky ground or a tundra belt. Moreover, because the other areas of Heaven Ascension mountain range shouldn't lack vegetation, water plants and areas with moderate temperatures, for cultivators who hunted for food, this region really was a bit too barren. Among the several stalks of white cobresia, there was a black solid lump. Gao Yanin easily determined that this was the excrement of some type of large insect. After following some chewed tracks, Gao Yanin quickly found several fat white bugs that were 2 to 3 times the size of a thumb. Truly disgusting. While looking at these fat white bugs, Gao Yanin's pretty brows furrowed deeply, pouting while thinking aloud. However, when she rubbed her sunken small stomach, this tall and slender young lady still strung these fat bugs up with a grass stem, preparing to bring them back to roast and eat. Lin Shi sat within a grove, before him some short hills. There were all types of weeds growing within, between them even some small yellow wild chrysanthemums. The last great meal he ate was in the middle of the night yesterday. While borrowing the fiery light of a few pieces of firewood, he caught more than 10 little fish that were even smaller than his pinky from a puddle. These were far from compensating his loss in strength, which was why 2 hours ago, he already began to shake mysteriously just like Meng Bai, his 4 limbs feeling weak. However, right now, he wasn't looking all over for food, instead extremely patiently sharpening some pieces of wood that he had already straightened with heat. At his side was a simple and crude longbow made from hardwood and some type of tough and slender vine. After finally sharpening the end of a slender piece of berry wood, he then split a feather from who knew what kind of goose into 2, inserting them into the grooves he carved into the slender piece of wood. With a string of plant fiber, he bound everything tightly in place, thus, a simple arrow already appeared. Lin Shi picked up this arrow in an extremely familiar manner, drew his bow, and then fired towards the muddy earth not far away. With a light so noise, this arrow stabbed into the muddy earth, piercing roughly 2 finger lengths in. Lin Shi's face immediately revealed an expression of satisfaction. He retrieved the arrow, and then after wiping away the earth from the arrow tip, he placed it next to him, starting to make another arrow. If everyone watched every one of his moves carefully, they would find that the heads of the arrows he made just happened to have a knot at the front. This way, when the arrow tips were sharpened, even without additional weights, they would still be a bit heavier than the other parts of the arrow, making its flight through the air more stable. In addition, the arrowhead's materials would also be a bit denser, more difficult to break. The Academy's wilderness survival training didn't allow them to bring any weapons, but there were no restrictions on collecting materials and making weapons themselves. The reason why Lin Shi continued to do this even when his stamina was being overdrafted, still forcefully enduring the extreme hunger, patiently creating the arrows, was because he already discovered hair excrement in the outside region. In this type of wasteland without large-scale herbivores, hares, badgers, foxes, and dogs became the best source of food. According to his experiences, some of the hares weighed more than 15 or 16 jin in weight. If he could hunt a hare, he could truly eat his fill, giving him even more stamina to gather or hunt other food. Lin Shi prepared materials for 6 arrows in total. However, when he completed the 4th arrow, his body suddenly stopped. On the slope, right before his eyes, appeared a moving lump of gray color. It was a gray rabbit, extremely plump, at least 16 or 17 jin in weight. For Lin Shi, this was extremely perfect. However, after suddenly stopping, his breathing instead became more calm and easy. He still didn't produce a single noise, continuing to complete the assembly of this arrow. The Windstalker special training taught Lin Shi that the more pivotal the situation was, the more patient one had to be, the more one had to wait for a suitable opportunity. Qin Siye slowly headed towards a low slope up ahead. Her luck wasn't bad. Early this morning, she already discovered 2 chicken egg-sized fowl eggs, moreover dug up a piece of stem tuber she could use as food. However, this naturally still couldn't completely free her from the feeling of hunger. These 2 days of poor meals and sleeping outdoors filled her sparkling jade complexion with a haggardness, like dust that covered fine jade. In the eyes of many of Yinqin's nobles and true golden spoons, a beauty like her naturally shouldn't be enduring this type of torment, she should be in a lady's private room and carefully tended to. However, Qin Siye herself didn't have this type of thinking. She didn't want to be a useless flower vase, to the extent of being lowered to being the accessory or plaything of men. That was why she would rather suffer, that was why she wanted to become strong, that was why she looked down on those people who weren't willing to suffer, who were still muddle-headed, lacking ambition. Suddenly, when she made her way around a low mound, preparing to examine the scenery ahead of her, Qin Siye's body went rigid, even her breathing momentarily pausing. She saw a lump of moving gray color, a plump hair. Almost the moment she saw this hair, the gray hair who was originally continuously nibbling on something straightened its body, noticing her. Without any hesitation, the hair immediately ran crazily towards the woods on the side. Qin Shiyue's mind immediately became overwhelmed with disappointment. She felt the urge to crazily chase after it, but her rationality told her that because the hare was already extremely close to the woods, even if she used up all of her strength to chase it, this hare could still completely disappear in the forest within a dozen breaths of time. However, right at this time, what made her body freeze up again, was that with a sound, a light wind noise sounded. An arrow shot out from the forest, striking this frantically fleeing hare with incomparable precision. This simple and crude arrow clearly lacked power, unable to penetrate through the gray rabbit, but a second arrow flew out without any hesitation, landing on the body of this hare who already had an arrow sticking out from its body, speed visibly slowed. The hare finally discovered that it couldn't escape into the forest, but after only running out a few steps, it powerlessly collapsed. Chapter Volume 326. That Peculiar Quarrel. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Even this exceptional beauty whose face didn't have a single flaw, after being tormented by hunger for 3 days, when faced with this plump hare which collapsed in front of her eyes, her first reaction was to forcefully swallow her saliva, and then she stared into the forest where the arrows were fired from, looking at the one who walked out. "It's you." The moment she saw who the one holding a simple and crude bow, walking out from the forest was, her chest clearly began to rise and fall intensely. This was someone she wasn't wishing to see, as well as the one she never expected to see. When he saw the clearly a bit thin and pallid Qin Siye, Lin Shi's expression remained extremely calm. He only nodded. "And, it really is a coincidence, it's me. I never expected your archery to be this good." Qin Siye avoided Lin Shi's gaze, looking at the body of the hare penetrated by the 2 arrows, slowly saying. Lin Shi smiled. "You just caught me at a good time, just a bit lucky. Good is good, bad is bad." Qin Siye's brows furrowed, and then she said, to hit a running hare with an improvised bow like this, of all of the new students, there might not be many who can do this. You do not need to be overly modest here. Lin Shi shrugged his shoulders. He could understand what Qin Siya was implying, but he was never someone fond of wasting energy to convince others. Moreover, right now, he was also extremely hungry, urgently needing to clean up this hare, and then eat his fill. As such, he only walked up to the hare that he had shot down, not arguing with Qin Siya at all. When she saw how Lin Shi wasn't willing to say too much to her, Qin Siya couldn't help but feel a bit vexed. She didn't want to look at Lin Shi again either, stubbornly heading towards a low depression to her right. I already headed in that direction, there's nothing there. Also, there were already people who went there, even the edible moss on the rocks swept clean. However, the woods behind me still have some hills, similar to this place, the chances of finding food might be a bit higher. When Lin Shi held the pump hare in his hand, his mind immediately became much more at ease. He looked at this beautiful girl's rear figure, feeling like this girl really was a bit unreasonable. However, he still felt that someone like Qin Siya who didn't hide her love or hate for others was much cuter than Lu Ziyu, so he couldn't hold himself back from warning Qin Siya. Thanks. Qin Siya's body went rigid. She didn't persist with her original intention either, turning around and walking towards the woods Lin Shi was originally in. Unknown as to what kind of mood prompted this, when she arrived at the edge of these woods, she couldn't help but turn around, giving Lin Shi a look, saying, "Your archery is so good, I reckon you should have some talent. If you worked a bit harder, your cultivation would not be that much inferior to others, you might also have great achievements in the future. Your arrangement with Lu Ziyu began because of me, so as long as you promise me to work hard, I can advise Lu Ziyu to cancel the agreement." Lin Shi originally smiled indifferently, not wishing to say any more, because for him, he didn't need much time to prove himself. At that time, Qin Siya will naturally understand. However, since Qin Siya was saying this with good intentions, he also looked at Qin Siya, calmly saying, "Even if I promise you this time, would you believe me? I told you before, that regardless of whether it is you or Lu Ziyu, your opinions towards me is something you've all decided, yet you are imposing it on me. If you believe what I say, then right now, you shouldn't have this type of opinion towards me." Qin Siya's brows furrowed deeply together. She couldn't help but give the carefree and calm Lin Shi a look, looking at his current expression, and then thinking about his excellent archery. All of this made her couldn't help but feel a bit of hesitation inside. Could it be that she really did wrongly blame him? If it really was as she thought, then the words she spoke previously outside Poisonous Medicine Valley were indeed a bit too disrespectful. Qin Siya looked at Lin Shi again. At this time, Lin Shi was currently wiping the hare's body clean with a piece of dried grass, removing the arrows. His stamina was clearly somewhat overdraft, complexion a bit overly pale, but his expression was calm, eyes carrying indescribable confidence. Qin Siya's heart trembled for no reason. She took a deep breath, and then with some hesitation, looked at Lin Shi, saying, "If I apologize for the words I said before, can you prove to me that you aren't the type of person I thought you were?" Lin Shi was a bit distracted. Just now, he was thinking that she really was a bit unreasonable, but he never expected her attitude to undergo this type of change. When he thought about how he didn't have Su Xingma to bother him, proving himself was also as easy as lifting his head. After a slight pause, Lin Shi nodded, and said, "Sure, but I really am too hungry right now. How about you let me finish roasting this hare and eat it first? Also, if you are willing to listen to my advice, feeling like watching me eat isn't that annoying, I advise you to stay here. It is because based on my observations, this region should also be the foraging ground of some foxes and badgers. The smell of blood and roasted meat might very well attract them. You can use some of the internal organs and hair. I don't need to set up a trap and bait them in. I believe this doesn't violate the rules." After a bit of hesitation, Qin Siya finally nodded in a rigid manner, agreeing. Because he felt that letting Meng Bai and the others see him eat a hare he hunted was also a type of torment, Lin Shi previously already picked a roasting spot in the forest. In an open space between some short trees, Lin Shi quickly started a fire with some kapok fiber and wood he prepared, proficiently propping the cleaned hair over the fire. Some of the bloody fur and skin were cut off by Qin Siye with a stone, scattered about the slopes outside. Then, she also went into hiding in the surrounding woods. Soon afterwards, an intoxicating fragrance wafted out from the roasted hair that was becoming more and more golden, drop after drop of oil also seeping out from the seemingly extremely plump hair meat. This made Lin Shi's stomach roar even more crazily, his stomach having a type of unbearable twitching feeling. Without waiting for the hair meat to be completely cooked, Lin Shi, who didn't want to torment himself anymore, used the stone slab he used to sharpen the arrows just now to cut off a long strip of hair meat from the surface. While completely ignoring the heat, he continuously huffed while chewing fiercely. This really is a delicacy. A wave of exceptional feeling of bliss entered his brain from the tip of his tongue. In the past world, he hadn't eaten rabbit meat that many times either. However, maybe because this was a real wild hare, and the species different, he could still clearly tell the difference. Even without any additional seasonings, the hare meat still released a strong grassy fragrance, and the meat also felt as if it immediately melted when it entered his mouth. No wonder the Academy's lecturer had said that normally, even though rabbit meat is harder to digest than other meats, and the nutrients are much fewer, because the rabbit species in Heaven Ascension mountain range had to resist the cold, and their predators were comparatively fewer, fat layers extremely plump, they instead became rare treasures for replenishing strength. This type of rabbit meat with alternating fat and lean layers was simply much more delicious, much more luxuriant than the finest marbled beef he was familiar with in his previous world. Lin Shi cut off another large strip of rabbit meat. With the previous strip already in his stomach, he didn't eat in as much of a hurry this time. The taste was similarly astonishingly great, and his mind was even more so filled with an unspeakable feeling. The heavens were unfair to him, making him descend into this completely unfamiliar world. However, the heavens also gave him preferential treatment, giving him many loved ones, and then letting him experience this type of journey. If it wasn't for coming to this world, how could he experience so many beautiful sceneries, eat so many delicious things? Lin Shi thought about the two different worlds as he ate the fragrant rabbit meat. He purposely controlled his own powerful hunger, eating slowly, letting the fragrance waft further into the distance. Just as he expected, when a larger half of the rabbit already entered his belly, his stomach bulging a bit, already preparing to smoke the remaining meat into jerky, saving some for the return trip during the last 2 days, two small gray figures emerged from the slope behind him. The eyes of Qin Siye, who had long been tormented by the meat fragrance until her mind was in chaos, also shone. These were two gray foxes, one big, one small. The big one looked to be a dozen or so jin in weight, the smaller one 7 or 8 jin. The instant he saw the two gray foxes, Lin Shi only covered the firewood that was still burning with earth, and then placed the remaining roasted rabbit meat on a piece of rock 10 or so steps away from this fire. Then, he carefully withdrew into the distance, hiding in the underbrush. This type of gray fox rarely encountered people in Heaven Ascension mountain range, so they didn't have too much vigilance. However, their natural disposition was also comparatively more timid, a single mistake would easily scare them away. Qin Siye's figure in the forest also completely turned into an incredibly beautiful sculpture. These two gray foxes, who would be much more beneficial to her recovery of stamina than the hare, ate the hair innards she threw away before, slowly approaching the forest. However, when these two gray foxes were already 100 steps from this forest, closing in on a slope near the snow line, there were suddenly some explosion-like noises, extremely abrupt in this quiet mountain wilderness. Shwa! These two gray foxes seemed to have immediately turned into a gust of wind, directly turning around and crazily running in the direction they came from. Qin Siye and Lin Shi's expressions both completely changed. Qin Siye's feet continuously pressed against the ground, her entire body flying out from the forest, the makeshift spear flying out from her hands. Lin Shi also took large steps out from the forest, the bow in his hands releasing light noises, 2 arrows chasing out like a streak of lightning. However, because there was no previous omen or preparation, together with the distance still being comparatively too far, the spear in Qin Sia's hands and the 2 arrows he fired out didn't hit anything. The 2 gray foxes almost immediately made their way around a low mound, disappearing from their line of sight. What is going on? When Lin Shi and Qin Xie exchanged a look of extreme disappointment, they heard faint sounds of argument, coming from a place seemingly not that far from where they were. Chapter Volume 327. Thunder Academy students, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Behind the forest was a low hilly region. After climbing onto a mound that was a bit higher in elevation, Lin Shi and Qin Xie were able to clearly see the 2 sides of the dispute. Because all of his close friends were within a radius of a dozen or so li, Lin Shi was quite worried that one of the parties involved was his own good friend. However, the moment they saw who was arguing, Lin Shi and Qin Xie's eyes instantly became filled with bewilderment. On one side of the dispute within this low hilly region were 3 gray-robed medicine department students. One of them had a tall figure, precisely one of the golden spoons who had previously mocked Lin Shi outside Poisonous Medicine Valley. On the other side was a young man dressed in fitted golden clothes. This was clearly not a student from Green Luan Academy. This youngster, who clearly wasn't from Green Luan Academy, was similar to Lin Shi and the others in age, but his face instead had a gloominess and austereness that completely didn't match his age. The fitted golden clothes he wore were also made with a certain type of beast skin. Even though it looked soft and lightweight, it clearly had good insulation properties. That was why his face was still rosy, no sign of being cold visible. The collar and cuffs, including the back of this golden fitted uniform, had some designs similar to lightning. At his side was a straight sword carved from tough hardwood, a foot or so longer than even normal longswords. Between the 3 black-cloaked medicine department students was a wolverine that had already collapsed. Its dirty and uneven yellow and black thick fur was covered in traces of blood, impaled and nailed to the ground by a wooden spear. I will say this once more. I was the one who chased after this wolverine first, its rear leg already wounded by me. Now that it ran here, its stamina had already been exhausted. All you guys did was stab your spear into my already captured prey, and then said that this prey is yours. This is not reasonable at all. When faced with the 3 medicine department students, this youngster in golden fitted uniform lowered his eyes slightly, looking at the wolverine who could provide at least 20 to 30 jin of food, saying this with a sunken voice. His hands and body were already shaking a bit, clearly also suffering from extreme hunger to the point where most of his stamina was gone. However, the expression on his face still remained extremely calm and cold. We already talked so much, but it seems like you don't understand what is going on at all. The large and tall medicine department golden spoon by Zihu, who previously mocked Lin Shi outside Poisonous Medicine Valley, gave this fitted golden-clothed youngster a look, saying with a sneer, even though we don't know why your Thunder Academy students are here, we aren't even sure if you really are a Thunder Academy student, we don't want to really look into it either. There is one thing that you must understand. This Heaven Ascension Mountain Range, in the end, is our Green Luan Academy's territory. We are training here, so the prey that appears here, is naturally all ours as well. By appearing here, you have undoubtedly disturbed our training as well. The golden-fitted clothed youngster's face became more overcast. He gave Bai Zihu a look, and then coldly said, Jade Falls City to the west, Dragon Snake Mountain to the east, Thousand Sunset Mountain down south, even Heaven Ascension Mountain Range here north, are all territory of Yunqin. When did Heaven Ascension Mountain Range suddenly even become Green Luan Academy's rear garden? Don't tell me the Emperor wrote an imperial order stating that apart from people from Green Luan Academy, no one else could enter Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. After a slight pause, this youngster coldly added, moreover, I believe that your Green Luan Academy should have already instructed you all that it should be first come, first served, to not do things like fight over prey. It seems like you really don't understand. Bai Zihu's face completely fell. If our Green One Academy's people were chasing after this Wolverine, then we might move aside, but as someone from Thunder Academy, by appearing here and fighting with us over this Wolverine, you are precisely our enemy. If you believe you can defeat the three of us, then you can come and take this Wolverine. If you cannot, then please do not waste your breath anymore. The golden-fitted clothed youngster clenched his teeth, saying coldly, "It seems like you all like to bully others with numbers, not willing to talk reason. Brother Bai, why are you wasting so much time with him? We definitely don't have as much patience as you." The two medicine department students at Bai Zihu's side both released a snort, not even giving this Thunder Academy student a look, directly pulling out a spear to clean this Wolverine. Good, good, you all were the first ones to decide not to be reasonable. This Thunder Academy student no longer said anything else, turning around and leaving. Even though they couldn't hear the two sides' conversation, from how they were facing each other, and the Wolverine that could provide one person with enough food for at least 2 days, Lin Shi and Qin Xie both guessed that this was the root of the dispute. Not far from these two's area of dispute was a bonfire, some dried bamboo that hadn't been completely burned yet on it. The noise that startled the two gray foxes should be the exploding sound these dried bamboo made when burning. Who is that? While looking at that golden-fitted clothes youngster's rear figure, Lin Shi's brows furrowed slightly, quietly asking Qin Xie. He only knew that the other party was definitely a cultivator, but why was there a young cultivator not from the academy this deep in Heaven Ascension mountain range? Moreover, judging from how this individual confronted the three medicine department students, the other party seemed to not be scared of Green One Academy, this giving him an extremely strange feeling. I do not know. Qin Xie shook her head, and then said with a sunken voice, "Should we go over and ask Bai Zihu and the others? It seems like this has drawn quite a few people. We can go and see who exactly the other party is." Lin Shi nodded. A few black figures appeared around this hilly wasteland, currently heading towards this place of dispute. Even though Lin Shi couldn't clearly make out that golden-fitted clothed youngster's face and expressions, that cold and prideful rear figure gave him a feeling that this matter wasn't finished. Because the wilderness was spacious and normally extremely quiet, the sound of the dried bamboo cracking and sounds of dispute traveled quite far. There were clearly quite a few Green One Academy students who were startled nearby, approaching this place when they heard the activity. When they had just descended the slope, Lin Shi and Qin Xie encountered 3 students who walked over along a depression, a bit of their red gowns visible through their fluttering black cloaks. These were Natural Arts Department students. Lin Shi. Even before Lin Shi and Qin Xie said anything, within these 3 Natural Arts Department, a fair-skinned youngster who seemed rather scholarly and quiet stared blankly for a moment, but then immediately cried out in shock. "You are..." Lin Shi was also surprised. He was one of the 3 Heaven's Choice students in this batch of new students, so it wasn't all that surprising for students of other departments to recognize him, but these 3 Natural Arts Department students clearly hadn't chatted with him before, yet his eyes had a pleasantly surprised expression, as if he saw a good friend. This left him quite surprised. "What, you don't remember me?" The fair-skinned, gentle-looking youngster, while everyone else wasn't paying any attention, winked towards Lin Shi, saying, "I am from Natural Arts Department. Also, recently, we've discussed matters regarding the direct spear strikes trial." Lin Shi immediately reacted. The other party was Black Rose from the Training Valley. Even though they had already gotten quite close in the Training Valley, the two both tacitly understood to never ask about the other's name. Moreover, Lin Shi never knew that the other party already fully guessed his true identity. "So you were Black Rose." A smile appeared on the corners of Lin Shi's mouth. He sized up this Black Rose, who he had never seen the true appearance of, and then put on an apologetic expression of suddenly remembering, "I remember, but last time, you didn't tell me your name." When Jiang Xiaoyi saw that Lin Shi didn't deny this, he already knew that his judgment right from the start was completely correct. As such, he excitedly walked over, reached out a hand, and then with an expression of incomparable respect, said, I'm Jiang Xiaoyi. Nice to meet you. Lin Shi looked at this friend who he had already gotten quite close to in the training valley, but only met for the first time now, seriously shaking Jiang Xiaoyi's hand. This type of feeling was perhaps just like meeting for the first time in person with a good friend who you chatted with online, grew extremely close to. When he recalled Lin Shi's world-shocking performance in the direct spear strikes trial and the blade and spear trial, and then looked at Lin Shi's gentle smiling expression, Jiang Xiaoyi, this youngster who normally wasn't all that overcautious couldn't help but become a bit reserved, momentarily laughing in an embarrassed manner, not knowing what to say. The other natural arts department students who walked with Jiang Xiaoyi frowned, quite confused, not knowing why Jiang Xiaoyi was so close to this 90-gene heaven's choice whose reputation really wasn't all that great. The sound of dried grass being stepped on sounded from not far away. 2 more academy students walked out from different directions. One of them had a chubby figure. The moment he saw Lin Shi, he was about to cry. It was precisely Lin Shi's good friend, little fatty Meng Bai. Meanwhile, the moment the other one saw Lin Shi walking together with Qin Siya, he revealed a stunned expression. It was one of the very few people Lin Shi disliked greatly, the handsome Lu Ziyu. Suddenly, Lin Shi seemed to have remembered something, using a voice only him and Qin Siya could hear, he said to her, Siya, why are you together with this 90-gene heaven's choice? What? Qin Siya stared blankly for a moment, still not reacting, but then heard Lu Ziyu who already walked over say, Siya, why are you together with this 90-gene heaven's choice? The words and tone Lu Ziyu spoke these words with were exactly the same as how Lin Shi spoke them. This made Qin Siya immediately release a pft sound, quietly laughing. I don't feel like explaining anything to him. If you have the patience to slowly explain things to him, then I'm going to head on first to find out just what kind of saint that fella is. Lin Shi laughed, and then after saying this quietly to Qin Siya, he pretended he didn't even see Lu Ziyu, patted Jiang Xiaoyi's shoulder, waved towards Meng Bai, and then directly walked towards where Bai Zihu's group of 3 medicine department students were. Did you see a person dressed in fitted golden clothes just now? When Qin Siya's laughter ended, she didn't bother explaining either, walking upwards, asking Lu Ziyu who was currently walking over. Lin Shi treating him as empty air already filled Lu Ziyu with anger, and Qin Siya's soft laugh, now not replying to his words either, even more so made his mind completely sink. He didn't know what happened between Lin Shi and Qin Siya that actually made her attitude towards him change so greatly. This filled him with an even greater wave of cold anger, to the extent where his expression was even a bit rigid, not too natural. Golden fitted clothes. I haven't. Because his brain was completely preoccupied with Lin Shi, how he was together with Qin Siya, he actually momentarily didn't think too much or feel too much shock when he heard her ask him about a golden fitted clothes individual. 90-gene heaven's choice. Bai Zihu and the others who had already returned to the bonfire, starting to skin the wolverine also heard the sounds of someone stepping on dried grass. They turned around, seeing Lin Shi appear from the mountain depression. The large and tall medicine department youngster also immediately revealed a sneer, nodding towards the wolverine in front of him, saying, What do you think, this wolverine we hunted isn't bad, right? Lin Shi smiled, saying, It isn't bad indeed, but I just don't know if you forcibly seized it from someone else's hands, or if you really hunted it yourself. The faces of Bai Zihu's group of 3 immediately sunk. Bai Zihu stared coldly at Lin Shi, saying, What are you trying to say? Lin Shi said, Nothing really, I just want to ask about that golden fitted clothed individual's background. Why should I tell you? Bai Zihu said with a cold laugh, Because you are 90-gene heaven's choice. When he heard Bai Zihu's mockery, Qin Siya who was in the back frowned, about to say something, but Lu Ziyu who walked at her side asked again, Siya, before, you had a falling out with Gao Yanan over this person, but today, it seems like your opinion of him has changed greatly, why is that? When she heard Lu Ziyu ask this again, Qin Siya couldn't pretend as if she didn't hear him either. With a sunken voice, she said, my previous opinion of him might have been a bit extreme. He said that in a bit, he will prove to me that he isn't like how I viewed him. Proof? What proof? With the judgment of a self-defense department lecturer present, there is no way that type of test is wrong. Lu Ziyu took a deep breath, controlling his own exploding mood, speaking with a sneer, someone like him is all talk to begin with, putting on an act. Xie, don't tell me you actually believe him. Qin Xie became a bit unhappy, saying clearly, whether I believe or not doesn't matter, we'll know if it's real or fake when he proves himself. She felt a bit discontent inside. Lu Ziyu's suppressed anger could no longer be restrained. He just could not figure out why this bumpkin from a small countryside town had such a weird magical power, to actually make Gao Yan and Qin Xie display clear changes in opinion one after the other. This was only a bumpkin with a meager cultivation level. Proof. Then we'll just let him prove himself. Lu Ziyu's expression even became a bit pale. He took a deep breath, and then took large steps towards Lin Shi, saying fiercely, Lin Shi, I really want to know what kind of method you are going to use to prove yourself to Xie.